devastation from day one of Russian invasion. Images on your screen showing the most haunting images from the first day of war till day 10. Next set of visuals on your screen capture mass destruction, intense shelling and airstrikes from day 11 to day 18 of the Russian invasion. From day 19 to day 22 now, Ukraine has battled raining missiles, non-stop bombardments and air raids. Here's a look at the war wrath unleashed on Ukraine. Very good morning, viewers, and thanks for being with us here on India Today. I'm Chaiti Narula with all the top stories. Let's start with the headlines first. Hopes of diplomacy between Russia and Ukraine rise amidst devastation. Putin claims success after Ukraine's NATO shift. ICJ orders Russia to stop invasion. Zelensky calls it a big win. Truce in horizon after 3 weeks of devastating war. Russia and Ukraine zero in on 15-point peace plan. India Today decodes 10 possible outcomes of the war. Children bear the cost of Putin's Ukraine invasion. War creating a child refugee every second. At least 1 million kids have fled Ukraine in the past 3 weeks. PFI student wing instigates hijab protests again, calls for Karnataka Bandh opposing the High Court verdict. Pro-hijab graffiti has been seen in many districts. Aam Aadmi Party likely to send Harbhajan Singh to Rajya Sabha. The off-spinner may become the face for Chief Minister Bhagwant Mann's port policy in Punjab. Kharkiv continuing to bear the brunt of the Russian attack. In Kharkiv, there's raging fire, billowing smoke that is being witnessed. We're getting you that breaking news at the top of this hour. On your screens right now, you can see the smoke screen right there. It's a total smoke screen in Kharkiv at the moment. Raging fire, billowing smoke there on your screens. You can see that. Russia upping the assault on the 22nd day of the war. Kharkiv continuing to bear the brunt of Russian attack.
Посмотрите, блядь. Сука, это дома мирные, блядь.
So as the assault on Ukraine continues, and while on the other side there is a 15-point peace plan, which is something that is being discussed between the two nations, and there is some sort of a hope right now for a fair amount of, for this war to end, perhaps, for there to be some sort of a truce between the two nations. While all of that is going on, look at the situation in Kharkiv. There is a Russian attack, the offensive in Kharkiv on your screens right now. Rajesh Pawar now joins us for the very latest. Rajesh, on one side, the two nations are talking about a 15-point peace plan. While Russia is continuing this offensive, we are seeing the images coming in from Kharkiv right now, and this does not look like the war is coming to an end anytime soon.
Look, there have been talks going on for now last 10 days or 11 days, in fact, and now they are talking on a regular basis, on everyday basis. But that does not mean the military operations have stopped. And as per reports last night in Kharkiv and Sumy, there were heavy battles fought. Also, there was reports of an air attack on Mariupol, which Russia has denied. The Ukrainians have alleged that there is a heavy airstrike and a theater got damaged in Mariupol in the airstrikes by Russian missiles, but Russia has denied all these allegations, and they have said there are no airstrikes. There are also reports of 17 people killed in Sumy when they were probably gone to collect groceries or something, but Russia has again denied that, and there have been these allegations and counter allegations from both sides. And as it has been happening for last 10 days, military operations will continue, and at the same time we are seeing that there are progress being made in talks sometimes, and the next day we come to know that no actual progress has been made. So this game has been going on, but I think it is still a good sign that at least talks are going on. Maybe one day we will have a breakthrough, but they are going on at the same time. Military operations are also on. Over to you.
No, absolutely. And so while we are seeing these images coming in from Kharkiv and the manner in which Russia's offensive on Kharkiv is panning out, questions also arise on what is the situation in Kiev too, because that is the other place which Russia is trying to now get their hands on. They've not been able to manage yet because the Ukrainian resistance is very strong. But what is the situation at the moment in the capital?
Look, as far as these images from Kharkiv and other places are coming, I would again say we should look at them with caution. We should take this information with caution. We should take it with a pinch of salt. They may not be exactly what is happening. A lot of these kind of videos and photos are circulating from the beginning of the war. About Kiev, it was quite...
But Rajesh, the images that we are showing right now have been verified by our entire team, doubly check, cross-check, and hence we are airing these images, and there is nothing inaccurate about anything that India Today is putting out. Those videos that you're talking about, probably you might be seeing them on other channels, but not on India Today. But at the same time, it's going to be interesting to get your perspective on where Kiev stands.
Look, I'm not doubting anyone, and I'm not saying, but these things are impossible to verify at this stage in the war. Like there was a report by BBC showing Antonov factory being bombed, and they showed even videos which were picked up from the local media. And I went to Antonov factory same day, and it was totally intact. So we should take all this with a lot of caution. I'm not blaming anyone. I'm not saying that anybody is giving false reports, but on social media and on local channels, a lot of such videos and pictures which cannot be verified have been going on since the beginning of the war. Having said that, now about Kiev, Kiev has been quiet last night. There were no bombings, no air raids in Kiev last night. However, fighting in Irpin, which is 8 kilometers away from now Kiev, fighting has been going on there continuously. Over to you.
No, absolutely. I understand what you're saying, and hence we've got an entire team in place that does several layers of authentication and verification before putting out any of these particular videos on your screens that you see. India Today is one channel you can trust. We don't rely on social media or WhatsApp forwards. These are verified images that we're putting up at the moment. The offensive on Kharkiv is there for everyone to see. And Rajesh, the biggest question here is that 4 rounds of talks, and you've been reporting there's risking your own life. 4 rounds of talks have been inconclusive. Now there is a 15-point peace plan in place, but that is also conditional to Ukraine not becoming a part of NATO. So what are those conditions by Russia at this point?
Look, these 4 rounds of talks have not been totally like failure. They did result in these humanitarian corridors, which probably saved a lot of lives. A lot of people could evacuate, a lot of people could leave the cities, the conflict zone. So they were not totally useless, but yes, they did not move forward much on the real questions where the war can end. And that was the security guarantees which Ukraine is asking for in lieu of not joining NATO, and about Donbass and Crimea. So those questions still remain unresolved. Both the parties Ukraine has showed some kind of softening of stand as regards to joining of NATO, but with Donbass and Crimea, which Russia wants to be a part, Donbass to be totally independent 2 countries and Crimea to be part of Russia, there has been sometime a softening of attitude from Ukraine, hints that probably they're willing to talk, and then there's again hardening of stance. So not much results in those directions, which are the key issues for the whole war. But there have been, since after these 4 rounds of talking, there have been an agreement to talk every day virtually. They are meeting now, their representatives are talking every day virtually. And this 15-point plan will totally depend on how much they soften their attitude, especially Ukraine with regards to Donbass and Crimea. Over to you.
Absolutely. Rajesh, continue to be with us. Rajesh Pawar, our soldier reporter, getting you second-by-second updates in terms of all that is going on. Continue to be with us. Don't go anywhere, Rajesh. Now, to counter Russian death drones striking Ukraine, the US is now supplying Ukraine with Switchblade drones, which work on suicide mode. The small drones made by AeroVironment ammunition major carrying warhead detonate on its impact. Russia, on its part, has been using stealthy suicide drones to attack the Ukrainian army. These unmanned drones, evading radar and traditional air defense system, can slip past enemy line of fire. This devil in the sky is lethal, using loitering munitions. which wait passively in the air, hovering over the target before coming down in one deadly swoop. The drone falls headfirst along a vertical trajectory similar to kamikazes, a Japanese aircraft loaded with explosives and making a deliberate suicidal crash on an enemy target. Russia is now using these drones to make precision attacks on the military targets in Ukraine.
Outstanding mission agility and precision make Warmate a destructive and effective tool on the contemporary battlefield.
As Russia intensifies its attack on Ukraine, it's time to see some of the haunting images that have really taken the world by shock. 3 people were killed and 5 wounded after shelling caused a fire at a market in eastern Ukrainian city of Kharkiv. These images on your screen show the extent of destruction after heavy shelling by Russian troops. You can see fire all over, plumes of smoke and charred vehicles. Russian troops attacked Ukrainian shelters. An air bomb was dropped on a swimming pool in Mariupol. Women and children were hiding from shelling in the building. You can see shelled building on your screens. No confirmation of any casualty just as yet. Ukraine continues to fight back. On your screens is wrecked parts of a crashed Russian aircraft which was shot down by Ukrainian troops in Mykolaiv. No confirmation of belongings to the pilot. Ukrainian media has released a video on Wednesday claiming Russian troops opened fire on people who were standing in line for bread in Ukrainian city of Chernihiv. The video on your screen shows dead bodies lying on the ground. Ukraine's media has claimed at least 10 people were killed in the incident. India Today independently could not verify the video. The Russian Defense Ministry released a video on Wednesday. It shows armored vehicles, tanks and other military equipment, including foreign-made anti-tank rocket launchers, allegedly captured by the Russian troops. The Russian Defense Ministry shared a video of an airstrike on a Ukrainian missile and artillery warehouse on Wednesday. According to Moscow, the airstrike was carried out by a high-precision missile system of the Russian armed forces. The warehouse was completely destroyed. Non-stop shelling has completely devastated separatist-controlled town Makivka in Ukraine, I beg your pardon. The visuals on your screen show the aftermath of the attacks. Damaged cars, destroyed vehicles, broken windows. Life has come to a standstill. Satellite photos on your screens show a suspected Ukrainian strike on the Russian-held Kherson International Airport and airbase. At least 3 helicopters appear to be on fire, and thick black smoke is being seen rising overhead from the blazes. The video on your screen has been released by Ukrainian forces. It shows broken and abandoned equipment of the Russian forces in Kiev suburbs, Bucha. Ukraine has claimed that Russian troops used residential buildings as shelter. Visuals on your screen are from capital city of Kiev, where 21 babies born to surrogates are kept safe in a basement. Nurses are taking care of babies because the fighting has made it impossible for their parents to reach them. From toddlers to children to elderly people, the war has spared no one. Doctors in Kharkiv have a rather tough decision to make. They have to arrange oxygen for patients suffering from acute COVID-19 infection amidst the bombardment from Russian forces. After 3 weeks of waging war, Ukraine and Russia are finally on the negotiation table. After 4 rounds of inconclusive talks that you're already aware about, the two nations have come down to a 15-point peace plan. Will the delegations from both the sides, from both the nations, broker truce? That's the big question. Take a look.
After 21 days of raging war, there is some hope for truce. Russia and Ukraine are finally in a mood to negotiate. After 4 inconclusive rounds of talks, the 5th one seemed to be a step in the direction of peace. Russia and Ukraine are now trying to chalk out a compromise formula, including neutrality status for Ukraine as one of the options. Under neutral status, Ukraine would become part of European Union but not NATO, like Austria and Sweden. Kremlin has given the green signal to this option.
Он сейчас, по большому счету, он сейчас всерьез обсуждается в увязке, конечно же, с гарантиями безопасности. Это ровно то, что вот президент Путин говорил в феврале на одной из своих пресс-конференций. Любые возможные варианты, любые общеприемлемые.
Kiev, however, has ruled out the Russian proposal. Ukraine wants a legally binding security pact signed by international partners. Ukrainian and Russian delegations have come up with the 15-point tentative peace plan. It lists the issue that needs to be resolved before a compromise. These include Ukraine declaring neutrality, limiting the Ukrainian armed forces, renouncing Kiev's ambitions to join NATO, and prohibiting Ukraine from hosting foreign military bases in exchange of security. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has claimed the talks are heading in the right direction.
Це важливо. Складно, але важливо, тому що будь-яка війна завершується угодою. Зустрічі тривають. Як мені доповідають, позиції на переговорах звучать вже реалістичніше. Проте ще необхідний час, щоб рішення були в інтересах саме України.
While talks are going on, Russia's relentless bombing of Ukraine continues. The question everyone is asking now is, how soon can the two warring nations reach an agreement? Bureau Report, India Today.
After 21 days of ferocious Russia-Ukraine war, there is now hope for truce that is being seen. This after Ukrainian President Zelensky acknowledged that Ukraine will not become a NATO member. Ukraine's bid to get NATO membership was at the heart of this crisis. Zelensky also said that he sees room for compromise in ongoing talks with Russia. On the other hand, Kremlin has shown signs of willingness to engage in negotiations. Here's a report.
Millions have fled their homes. Hundreds have lost their lives. Ukraine has suffered an unprecedented human tragedy in the face of the Russian invasion. Now, after 21 days of fighting, there is hope of a truce. The man who is leading the war against mighty Vladimir Putin, Ukrainian President Zelensky, says he sees room for compromise in talks with Russia. This comes as Moscow has stepped up bombardment of Kiev, targeting even residential areas.
І працювати кожному на своєму місці, кожному, в тому числі нашим представникам, нашій делегації у переговорах з Російською Федерацією. Це важливо. Складно, але важливо, тому що будь-яка війна завершується угодою. Зустрічі тривають. Як мені доповідають, позиції на переговорах звучать вже реалістичніше. Проте ще необхідний час, щоб рішення були в інтересах саме України.
The main provocation for the war was Ukraine's bid to get membership of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Zelensky has said Ukraine will not become a member of NATO.
Зрозуміло, що Україна не є членом.
We realize that Ukraine will not become a member of NATO. We understand this. We are adequate people. Kiev needs new formats of interaction with the West and separate security guarantees.
Я радий, що наш народ починає це розуміти.
Earlier, Russia's foreign minister had said Moscow does not aim to overthrow the Kiev government and it hopes to achieve significant progress through talks. Zelensky has climbed down and is no longer interested in NATO membership. Kremlin has shown signs of willingness to engage in negotiations. With both nations making climb down, diplomacy, it seems, will succeed in ending the war that has cost both nations heavily. Bureau Report, India Today.
The Russia-Ukraine war has been raging for 3 weeks. Moscow continues to rain missiles on Ukraine. Outmanned and outgunned Kiev is still holding fort. While the diplomatic talks are on, the world is asking when and how is this war going to even end? India Today has decoded the 10 possible scenarios in which the war may just end. Here's a report.
3 weeks and peace is still a distant dream in Ukraine. Cities continue to be bombarded relentlessly by Russian missiles. As the humanitarian crisis deepens, India Today decodes the 10 possible scenarios in which the war could end. Scenario 1. Putin bombs Ukraine into submission at a massive human cost and installs a puppet government in Kiev. Scenario 2. Zelensky is forced to quit and a new government takes over in Ukraine. Scenario 3. Kiev is made neutral, irrespective of who rules it, or Ukraine is demilitarized like Austria. Scenario 4. Putin is forced to halt what he calls military operations with altered status quo, allowing talks and diplomacy to take effect. Scenario 5. Ukraine is forced to recognize the 2 breakaway regions of Donetsk and Luhansk, as well as Kherson, as independent regions captured by Russian forces. Scenario 6. Putin escalates war by using chemical weapons or targeting West's arms depots in neighboring Poland, prompting NATO to get involved in the war directly. Scenario 7. Putin scales back his goals in the face of a crumbling domestic economy, and Ukraine becomes what Afghanistan was to Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev, or the US and its allies after 2001. Scenario 8. Ukraine registers an unlikely heroic victory with continued little weapon support and humanitarian aid supplies from the West. Scenario 9. Sanctions by the West cripple Russia's economy, making Putin extremely unpopular, leading to an uprising in his country or even a coup taking place. Scenario 10. Cornered by NATO and the European Union and depleted of weaponry, a frustrated Putin goes for nuclear strikes, potentially leading to World War III and widespread catastrophe. Bureau Report, India Today.
Bruised and battered Ukraine refuses to bow down. Despite relentless Russian strikes, Ukrainian spirit to fight back remains undeterred. The war-torn nation is doing everything it can to stall the Russian advances, even as the enemy troops encircle Ukrainian capital Kiev. Here's a detailed report.
Three weeks of hellscape. A ravaged country, flattened and punished by a superpower. Its capital under siege. Armed forces in disarray. Cities burning. But Ukraine continues to show remarkable resilience. Ukrainian guns are far from falling silent. These night images of incredible Ukrainian counter-strike. These night images of incredible Ukrainian counter-strike show how the overwhelmed, outmanned and outgunned nation is still fighting back. Still taking the war into enemy camps. With a brave and determined fight back. The barrage of attacks so far successful in stalling a full-blown takeover of capital Kiev by the far superior and much better armed Russian invading force. Ukraine soldiers with tank-killing guns were seen destroying Russian armored carriers and tanks with the trademark Z symbols. The Ukrainian projectiles landing with deadly precision, taking out the Russian combat vehicles. Ukrainian defense also released video of Russian supplies and columns of equipment for its convoy in outskirts of Kiev, coming under massive bombardment. Drone images capturing the full impact of large-scale explosions.
You know, Ukrainian forces are highly motivated. They're fighting on their own ground, and they're also highly mobile, unlike the Russian forces, which are sort of not mobile at all, really.
While fighting back hard, Ukraine has not abandoned peace efforts. President Zelensky asserted once again that his country has no plan to join NATO.
We realize that Ukraine will not become a member of NATO. We understand this. We are adequate people. Kiev needs new formats of interaction with the West and separate security guarantees.
Bruised, battered, bleeding, yet biting back. Can Ukraine still do the unthinkable? With Rajesh Pawar in War Zone Kiev. Bureau Report, India Today.
Relentless attacks, bombardments and civilian killings. The gory side of destruction has become synonymous to Russia-Ukraine war, even as Ukraine continues to defend the motherland for 21 days. Missile attacks in Kiev and strikes in Lviv paint a truly disturbing picture of the war front. Here's more to it.
Death and destruction everywhere. From capital city Kiev,
A complete building has been destroyed, and there was another blast which I saw just before this. It was in the middle of a road. Nearby buildings were damaged, but it fell on a broad road, so not much casualties. But here, I believe few people have died, and a lot of them were injured.
to Ukraine's western city of Lviv.
Air raid sirens up again, blaring in the city of Lviv. People have been going into the bomb shelters. Not many, quite a few of the apartments over here do not have bomb shelters, but the parking and the basements are where they're moving.
Russian missiles are raining misery. This four-story residential building in Kharkiv was reduced to rubble in seconds, killing at least 2 people. Ukraine has alleged Russian airstrikes have made evacuation attempts dangerous. The relentless Russian assault and the West's risk-averse assistance has forced Ukraine to climb down. The country has reaffirmed it will not join NATO.
4 high-rise buildings in Kiev were bombed this morning. Dozens of people were dead. They shell schools and universities. It is clear that Ukraine is not a member of NATO. We understand that. We are rational people. For years, we have heard about the alleged open door policy, but we have already heard that we will not go in there.
While Russian forces are advancing, the war is proving a costly affair for Moscow. The UK has imposed sanctions on 370 more Russian elites. Other US allies are also expanding sanctions to cover more Russian firms and oligarchs.
It's important for Canadians and the world to know that Canada will continue supporting Ukraine and its independence, integrity, sovereignty, including its right to defend itself.
Russia has hit back. It has vowed to reduce dependence on the West.
We will solve the problem, and the solution will be to no longer depend on our Western partners. be it governments or companies that are acting as tools of Western political aggression against Russia instead of pursuing the interest of their businesses. We will make sure that we never again find ourselves in a similar situation and that neither some Uncle Sam nor anybody else can make decisions aimed at destroying our economy. We'll find a way to eliminate this dependence. We should have done it long ago.
Since the start of the war, hundreds of civilians have lost their lives to Russian bombings. 2.8 million people have fled the war in search of safe zones. The 5 rounds of talks have so far failed to yield a ceasefire. Bureau Report, India Today.
We're slipping to a very short commercial break. When we return, children bear the cost of Putin's Ukraine invasion. At least 1 million kids have fled Ukraine in the last 3 weeks. This is more just about a bit.
Rahul Kanwal.
23 years of experience.
5 conflicts covered. Unmatched time in war zone.
The first embedded operation in the history of Indian television journalism.
Gaurav Sawant. 28 years of reporting. 8 conflicts covered. Unmatched hours in conflict areas.
Actual firing is taking place. The grads are firing.
Shivarur. 19 years of reporting. 5 conflicts covered. Unmatched view of international crossfires.
And the attack guns are firing away.
Geeta Mohan. 18 years of reporting. 3 conflicts covered. When the world is at war, there is no compromise on India Today.
When it's the world's biggest news story, there's only one gold standard of journalism. When it's the world's biggest news story, there's only one gold standard of journalism.
From the break of war,
This is Mariupol. You hear a series. Hear this sound.
through the debris and devastation.
You can hear more blasts that are taking place. We are moving away from this area. We are being told to leave this area because it's not safe to be here. You can hear some blasts that are taking place.
Please close the sky.
Close the sky. That's the message.
Over the roar of war machines.
We're very careful, Pawan, very careful. These are anti-tank mines that are laid on the road here.
Continuous firing taking place.
No compromise, no half measures.
उन्होंने हमारे ऊपर हथियार तान के रखा है.
This is one of the frontline areas where trenches have been dug up, bunkers have been set. They're all prepared, all set to take on the Russian forces.
The world watched the Ukraine war only on India Today.
With Russia-Ukraine war entering day 22, children continue to remain the biggest victims. The invasion of turning a child refugee every second. The data released by UNICEF recently states that about 1.5 million children have fled Ukraine in the past 3 weeks. As Russia intensifies its attack on Ukraine, there seems to be no end to the heartbreaking images. The neighboring countries have also opened the doors for traumatized young refugees. For some, what may be a normal childhood just about a few weeks ago has now turned into a complete nightmare with an uncertain future. The images on your screens comes from the capital city of Kiev, where down a dusty basement, hiding from the shelling, has become shelter for the newborns. The place hosts 21 babies born to surrogates. Nurses are now taking care of these babies as the fighting has made it impossible for their parents to reach them.
More than 200 schools, around 35 hospitals, and hundreds of residential buildings, possibly close to 2,000, have been destroyed since the war began in Ukraine. Towns and villages across the eastern half of the besieged country do not have electricity and water. And in the intense cold of the snow-covered terrain, there is no heat. Millions of ordinary Ukrainians are hiding in bunkers and shelters, shivering in the cold uncertainty of mounting loss. UNICEF has put up this appeal on their landing page on Ukraine. Children in Ukraine are facing a deadly crisis as the hostilities in their country are increasing. Like all conflicts, this is turning into a children's crisis, and they will need as much humanitarian support and help as we can provide. UNICEF says there are 7.5 million children in Ukraine, and the war poses an immediate threat to their lives and well-being. With the intensifying of indiscriminate bombing of civilian targets, lives are being lost, and some of them are children. On 7th of March, human rights sources inside Ukraine released actual numbers of children killed, 38 dead and 71 injured. The survivors are rushing to the borders, clad in their winter clothing, holding on to their mothers or elders, trusting hands clasping those of adults, making unplanned journeys to the unknown, to faraway lands where strangers try and make them feel welcome.
Just 2 days ago, we had a transport of 700 kids. And, it's not easy to find a place for anybody, but it's even tougher to find a place for 700 kids in the same one place.
As their homes and lives are torn apart by other unseen strangers, firing big guns from somewhere beyond the dreadful horizon. Natasha, a 16-year-old Ukrainian refugee from before this war even started, writes, "The war came to us and happiness is no more than a ghost from my dreams." Natasha used to live in the seaside village of Shirokne in eastern Ukraine. The last time she saw her house, she was 11. Natasha writes, "Our hearts are full of sadness. We have no home. The night is black. Every day that the war in Ukraine goes on, every day that the bombs rain from above, every time another school goes up in flames, and every bullet that takes a parent away, another Natasha's heart fills with sadness. 100 hearts sad, and the night stays black."
We're slipping into a very short commercial break. When we return, 4 top Russian commanders killed in Ukraine as a result of the country's fierce resistance. Details in just about a bit.
When it's the world's biggest news story, there's only one gold standard of journalism. This is Ukraine's true danger zone. Up close and fearless in Ukraine's combat zone.
You are watching India Today.
The Russian military might has met a resilient Ukrainian army. Putin's forces have suffered some bitter blows in the last 3 weeks of the war. So far, 4 top Russian commanders have been killed in Ukraine. Here's a report.
Armed to the teeth, tough, ruthless, the Russian military is one of the most intimidating forces in the world. But the Ukrainian resistance has been equally fierce. Ukraine has inflicted enough injury on the aggressor. Another top Russian commander, Major General Oleg Mityaev, has been killed. He died during a fierce battle with Ukrainian troops in Mariupol. He was the commander of 150th Motorized Rifle Division. This is not the first blow for the Russians in this war. Earlier, a key commander of the Russian tank regiment, Colonel Andrei Zakharov, was eliminated in Kiev after a heavy fight. Zakharov was a recipient of the Order of Courage from Putin himself in 2016. In a fatal blow to Russia's crack special forces, Major General Vitaly Gerasimov, the Chief of Staff of the 41st Army, was killed in Kharkiv. Russia also lost the head of the 7th Airborne Division Major General Andrei Sukhovetsky. A war hero, the general's loss is being seen as a bitter blow to Putin's crack units. A sign Russia's assault isn't going to plan.
The key difference now between the Ukrainian and the Russian forces is the morale component. The Ukrainians have fought very well and morale is very high, and that is infectious, and it is clearly not just between the Ukrainian professional soldiers but also the Ukrainian civil society as a whole. They see this as a fight for national survival. And on the Russian side, morale is very low.
The death of the highly decorated veterans could be a major demotivator for the Russians and a morale booster for the Ukrainian defenders.
The Russian invasion on Ukraine has left the country in ruins. Houses burnt, commercial establishment destroyed. The horrifying visuals that have emerged show the extensive damage to the cities of Ukraine. Take a look.
Сегодня вот прилетела бомба. Посмотрите, что случилось. Авиаудар.
All right, the city of Mariupol has suffered significant damage to the urban infrastructure. The before and after images show the destruction that has been caused by the Russian troops. The residential buildings, commercial establishments destroyed after back-to-back attacks. Another city that has been one of the worst impacted is Chernihiv. After deadly attacks hit the city over the last 22 days, the streets of the city are filled up with dead bodies. Horrifying images of locals carrying the injured and the dead have surfaced that show the fatality of the aftermath of the attack. A town in Donetsk region, Makivka, is in ruins. Residential buildings and markets are charred due to repeated shellings by the Russian army. Locals can also be seen together, working together to repair the damage caused by brutal Russian attacks. As Russia continues to wage war against Ukraine, here are the overnight developments. An emergency has been called to discuss Ukrainian humanitarian situation. The meeting has been called by the US, UK, France, Albania, Ireland and Norway. Slovakia has agreed to send key Soviet-era air defense system to help defend against Russian airstrikes. According to reports, Slovakia, that is one of the 3 NATO allies that have the S-300 missile defense system, wants assurances that the systems will be replaced immediately. President Zelensky held talks with Turkish President Erdogan and updated him on the Ukraine people's struggle against the ongoing aggression. Both the leaders talked about ways to intensify peaceful dialogue with Russia. Zelensky also thanked the Turkish president for his support. Canada has banned Belarusian aircraft from its airspace. This is in response to the Russian ally Belarus backing the ongoing invasion of Ukraine. The European Union and the US have also imposed sanctions against Belarusian military members and the personnel. Ukraine handed over 9 captured Russian soldiers to secure the freedom of the mayor of the city of Mariupol, who was detained last week. All the captured soldiers were children born in 2002 to 2003. Ukraine has claimed Ivan Fedorov was kidnapped last Friday by the Russian forces. Netflix has brought back Ukrainian President Zelensky's satirical political comedy series, Servant of the People. Zelensky is playing role of a teacher who unexpectedly becomes president after a video of him complaining about corruption suddenly goes viral. We're slipping into a very short commercial break here on India Today. When we return, PFI's student wing instigates hijab protests again, calls for Karnataka Bandh. Details in just a bit.
As Russia declared war on Ukraine, as the world was plunged again into crisis, with the only Indian team in the real war zone.
This is Mariupol. You hear a series. Hear this sound.
I will show you a quick, so to say, bombshell room tour.
I can smell the gunpowder in the air.
And without pause, India Today totally dominates viewership and smashes the competition. When it's the world's biggest news story, there's only one gold standard of journalism.
The fight over hijab continues despite the Karnataka High Court's order upholding the ban on the use of headscarves on campuses. Protests are continuing in different parts of the state. Maulana Sagar Ahmad Khan Rashadi, a leading cleric of Karnataka, has called for state bandh today. The Campus Front of India, the students' wing of Popular Front, has backed the call for the bandh. Meanwhile, graffiti supporting hijab surfaced in Hospet, the district headquarters of Vijayanagara. The graffiti said, "Hijab is our dignity," was later removed by the district administration. 4 separate cases were registered in 3 police stations in the district in connection with the graffiti incident. On Wednesday, a group of students wearing hijab boycotted the college in Hassan district. They claim hijab is more important than education. And the Aam Aadmi Party is likely to send former cricketer Harbhajan Singh to the Rajya Sabha. AAP is set to get 5 Rajya Sabha seats, and the party may look at Harbhajan Singh as a member of parliament. Here's a report.
The first hint about Harbhajan Singh's new innings came with this photograph tweeted by the Congress leader. But here comes a googly. It is not Navjot Singh Sidhu. Harbhajan Singh will be partnering. He is likely to become a Rajya Sabha MP from the Aam Aadmi Party. According to sources, the Bhagwant Mann government may propose Harbhajan Singh for the upper house. Aam Aadmi Party is set to get 5 Rajya Sabha seats by the end of this month. The final call on Harbhajan's candidature will be taken by the Aam Aadmi Party Political Affairs Committee. Sources say Harbhajan may also be given the responsibility of the Sports University in Jalandhar, a key promise by Mann during his campaign. The Turbinator had earlier taken to Twitter to congratulate Aam Aadmi Party for making history in Punjab, calling Mann a friend. Bhajji now looks all set to spin a new career. Bureau Report, India Today.
So wrap from me, Chaiti Narula on this bulletin. For more news and updates, don't forget to log on to indiatoday.in or go ahead and download our app.
Tonight, we are all soldiers of music, wielding the power of art in defense of a free and democratic Ukraine. Music offers solace for humanity, but it can also be weaponized against oppression. Tonight, we are all soldiers of music, wielding the power of art in defense of a free and democratic Ukraine.
It was being broadcast tonight live to Europe, including Ukraine, and I hope that some people there were listening. Yeah. So it's a sort of transference of thought and emotion.
I was crying, I was screaming bravo, because I feel like in this moment all of us become like relatives, like one family, one free family.
When it's the world's biggest news story, there's only one gold standard of journalism. This is Ukraine's true danger zone. Up close and fearless in Ukraine's combat zone.
You are watching India Today.
He reports amidst the attacks.
Very close. It was just on top of us, everybody on the ground.
He reports amidst the shellings.
Bombing is coming closer to us. Everybody's running now. Panic everywhere.
He reports from cities under siege. A Special Forces veteran's unmatched view of the war.
They're firing. They're firing on us now. Because I tried to show them on the camera.
Okay, you need
go, go. Don't stop, bro. Don't stop.
Soldier reporter Rajesh Pawar, only on India Today.
Here's India Today bringing you these images right from day one of the havoc and devastation coming in from Ukraine. These are compelling visuals coming in on your screens here. Through the weeks of war that's been on, constant shelling, bombarding that has happened in the last few weeks. We're looking at 22 days at a stretch, and Russia shows no signs of de-escalation. These are the most haunting images that we bring to you right here on India Today on the war until day 10. There you have it, day 10 to day 20. We're looking at images coming in that shows how residential buildings were ravaged, they were targeted. Several commercial areas in the bustling city of Kiev completely bombarded. What's left behind is rubble, many of these towns now really resembling ghost towns. We see plumes of smoke coming in from buildings, extensively damaged. There is no chance of any recovery. Looking at the extent of destruction, it appears that Ukraine now reeling under this crisis for the last 22 days. And these are images coming in from day 19 to day 22. Ukraine here battling raining missiles, non-stop bombardments, air raids. Here's a quick look at all those images here that shows a very sorry story in many parts of Ukraine. Several historic buildings brought down to rubble. Here's a look at the wrath that this war has unleashed on Ukraine. And India Today's persistent coverage continues even on day 22. I'm Nabila Jamal. First, the headlines. It's day 22 of Russia's invasion, but Putin's guns are far from silent. Air raids, missiles rain misery on Kharkiv. Capital Kiev witnesses barrage of rocket strikes. Hopes of diplomacy between Russia and Ukraine rise amid devastation. Putin claims success after Ukraine's NATO shift. ICJ orders Russia to stop the invasion. Zelensky calls it a big win. And truce in the horizon after 3 weeks of devastating war. Russia and Ukraine zero in on 15-point peace plan. India Today decodes that 10 possible outcomes to this war. And United States sending Switchblade suicide drones to Ukraine to counter Russian kamikaze drones, which are slipping past Ukraine air defense. And children bear the cost of Putin's Ukraine invasion, war creating a child refugee every second. At least 1 million kids have fled Ukraine in just the last 3 weeks. Unimaginable human cost of war, massive piles of bodies in Mariupol's last standing hospital, most heart-wrenching images coming in from Ukraine's most pulverized zone. Now, as Russia intensifies its attack on Ukraine, it's now time to see some of those haunting images that has convulsed the whole world. Let's have a look at these images coming in from several cities that's now been ravaged. 3 people were killed, 5 wounded after shelling caused a fire at a supermarket there in eastern Ukrainian city of Kharkiv. These images on your screens here showing the extent of destruction after heavy shelling by Russian troops. You can see fire all over, plumes of smoke, charred vehicles. Almost sights and scenes that you see in most parts of the city of Kharkiv. Russian troops attack Ukrainian shelters. An air bomb was dropped on a swimming pool in Mariupol. Women and children were hiding from shelling in the building. You can see shelled buildings on your screens here. No confirmation of any casualties as yet, but this charred, burnt building really speaks of a gory story. Ukraine continues to fight back. On your screens here is wrecked parts of a crashed Russian aircraft, which was shot down by Ukrainian troops in Mykolaiv. No confirmation as yet of the belongings of the pilot, and the casualties further have not been confirmed. Russian troops dropped a powerful bomb on a theatre in the encircled Ukrainian port city of Mariupol. According to reports, more than 1,000, including women and children, were taking shelter there. In fact, the footage on your screens here from inside the theatre was taken before the bombing. Exact numbers of casualties still unknown. An overnight shelling wreaks havoc in Kharkiv. Image on your screen here showing you the moment when the city was attacked by Russian forces. You can see buildings, shops on fire, huge plumes of smoke seen in those areas. Kharkiv, the second most populated city, ravaged. Ukrainian media has now released a video on Wednesday claiming that Russian troops opened fire on people who were standing in line for bread in Ukrainian city of Chernihiv. The video on your screens here shows how dead bodies are lying on the ground. Ukraine's media has now claimed that at least 10 people were killed in this incident. India Today independently could not verify this video. Russian Defense Ministry has released a video on Wednesday. It shows armored vehicles, tanks and other military equipment, including foreign-made anti-tank rocket launchers allegedly captured by Russian troops. Here are images that really speaks on Russia inching closer while it takes over several military establishments in Ukraine. Now, these images are from the capital city of Kiev. Ukrainian people are seen getting rescued from Russian troops' attacks on a residential area. According to reports, 1 person died in the attack, 3 are injured. Emergency Service Department has managed to evacuate 30 people from that building that was shelled by Russian forces, contrary to claims Russia makes that they are not targeting civilian establishments. Now, the Russian Defense Ministry shared a video on an airstrike on a Ukrainian missile and artillery warehouse on Wednesday. And according to Moscow, the airstrike was carried out by high-precision missile system of the Russian armed forces. The warehouse was completely destroyed. Images here, satellite images showing the extent of devastation and fire that looms large. And non-stop shelling has completely devastated separatist-controlled town Makivka in Ukraine. Visuals on your screens here showing the aftermath of attacks, damaged cars, destroyed vehicles, broken windows. Life literally has come to a standstill. Satellite photos on your screens here showing a suspected Ukrainian strike on the Russian-held Kherson International Airport and airbase. At least 3 helicopters appear to be on fire. Thick black smoke is now being seen rising from those buildings due to the blaze that still hasn't been doused. This video here on your screens has been released by the Ukrainian forces themselves. It shows broken and abandoned equipment of Russian forces in Kiev suburbs. Bucha. Ukraine has claimed that Russian troops used residential buildings as shelter. We're seeing nonetheless Ukrainians putting up a stiff fight. The visuals on your screens here are from the capital city of Kiev, where 21 babies born to surrogates are now kept safe in that basement. Nurses are taking care of those babies because fighting has made this quite impossible for their parents to reach them. From toddlers to children to elderly people, war has really spared no one. And doctors in Kharkiv have a tough decision to make. They have to arrange oxygen for patients suffering from acute COVID infection amid the bombardment from Russian forces. Now, on day 22 of this invasion in Ukraine, and Russia continues to attack cities causing heavy damage. City of Kharkiv continues to be the worst hit. A market area in Kharkiv was bombed, following which fire raged on for hours, with smoke engulfing the nearby buildings as well. Russia has now released a video of their brutal airstrikes on Ukraine. The video shows missile attacks that burn an area into ashes within minutes. A theatre where hundreds took shelter was also bombed. All people who took refuge in that theatre are currently trapped under that debris. Casualties are yet to be confirmed. The capital city of Kiev continues to face back-to-back strikes. A rocket was hit at a residential area, has destroyed that entire neighborhood. But Ukrainians now refuse to give up. Their resistance has also caused significant damage to Russian military. Ukraine has attacked Russian tanks that were firing at shelters across the city of Mariupol. The city has now been hit hard by Russian shells, air bombs. Ukraine also shot down a Russian chopper at Mykolaiv. Now, amid non-stop shelling in Ukraine and loss of life and property, there are hopes of truce between the two nations. Reports have now suggested that Ukraine and Russia have made a 15-point peace plan that includes ceasefire and withdrawal of Russian troops if Ukraine declares neutrality and will not join NATO. This is a promise that Russia needs. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin has now said that the country has succeeded in their Ukraine operation. Putin has also said that Russia has no plans to occupy Ukraine and that the operation was done for self-defense. The remarks now come shortly after the International Court of Justice has slammed Russia in its ruling. The ICJ has said Russia should suspend all its military operations and also ensure that any military or armed units supported by it take no further steps to continue. The order has been passed. It will be passed and have a binding effect, invokes international legal obligations of the state. The court has further asked both nations now to refrain from any action that may escalate this situation further. Now, reacting to the International Court of Justice verdict, Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky has now said that Ukraine has gained complete victory in court, adding that if Russia fails to comply, it will isolate itself further.
Переговори заради України. Мої пріоритети на переговорах абсолютно зрозумілі. Завершення війни, гарантії безпеки, суверенітет, відновлення територіальної цілісності, реальні гарантії для нашої країни, реальний захист для нашої країни.
Ukraine is grateful to the United States for its overwhelming support, for everything US government and your people have done for us, for weapons and ammunition, for training, for finances, for leadership in the free world which helps us to pressure Russia. I'm grateful to President Biden for his personal involvement, for his sincere commitment to the defense of Ukraine and democracy all over the world. I'm grateful to you for the resolution which recognizes all those who commit crime against Ukraine, Ukrainian people as war criminals. However, now it is true in the darkest time for our country, for the whole Europe, I call on you to do more. New packages of sanctions are needed constantly every week until the Russian military machine stops.
All right, let me quickly cut across to Maria Pisarenko from Kiev. She's been contributing with her factual reports from on ground, braving all that attack and the threat that's looming large over the capital city of Kiev. Maria, I'm really happy to see you safe and sound. Give us a sense of what's happening around you. Would you really be able to show us the kind of calm that we see prevailing in Kiev? But the fact of the matter is that Russian forces have encircled the capital city and a strike could be imminent in the next day or two. Parallelly, talks are happening. There seems to be some progress. I know Ukrainians are keeping their fingers crossed.
Yes, but still want to stress that there are no encirclement of Kiev, so still the Russian troops are only in the northern part of Kiev. They are still trying to come closer, and these attempts are not successful. But still we see that Russian rockets do target the residential areas closer to city center. So today, this morning, again, we saw just the same attack and Russian rocket, which was hit by Ukrainian air defense system, fell onto the residential building in the Desnyansky district, which is also solely residential area with people living there in high-rise buildings. And the aftermath of this attack, also the debris of the house, we see the fire which was already put down, and also one person died and two people were injured in this attack, or so to say, after this rocket fell onto the residential building. So as we see, these attacks and these kind of situations have been happening in Kiev just already 3 days in a row after a short period of relatively quiet situation. And everybody understands that, yes, waiting for the results of negotiations could be just impossible and senseless, because yesterday the draft of these negotiations surfaced. It was about the fact that Ukraine should give up the ambitions to become a member of NATO, and also all the points in interest in Ukrainian. And this spurred a great debate on social media among experts that this is not what Ukraine should go after, and this is not what Ukraine is fighting for. So we heard the statement from the Office of the President that this is the draft and these are not the Ukrainian demands. So these are Russian demands in this draft, and Ukrainian demands are yet to be added to this draft and shown by the Ukrainian representatives in this negotiation group. And while this is happening, while negotiations are kind of happening on a very slow pace, we have seen the terrible event which happened not in Kiev but in Mariupol, which is to the south of Kiev, closer to Donbass, closer to Russian border. Yesterday, Russians targeted the drama theater in Mariupol, which was in the city center, and this drama theater was used as a shelter for over 100 of people with children. These were families, women, children, civilians. No military were found there. And the worst thing is that on the pavement around this drama theater, so this is the very center of Mariupol, people put with white with white color the word "diti," which means children, so that the pilots of aircraft or of fighter jets of Russians could see from above, from the sky, that two words "diti," two words "children," were written on the pavement and won't target this theater. But nevertheless, this didn't stop Russians from bombing this theater, and the number of casualties is still very high.
You know, Maria,
to get the numbers.
From what it appears is that Russian forces, as much as they claim that civilians are not the target, civilian establishments is definitely not what they're looking at. On the other hand, it appears that they're trying to break the confidence, the courage and the spirit of Ukraine's civilians, many of whom have doubled up as soldiers for Ukraine to fight for their country. So it appears almost a threat that do not step in, do not resist, if not this is a fate you'll land in.
Yeah, right. So what we see right now are these chaotic attacks. Many people are comparing this to the day 1 and day 2 of the war, when we have seen kind of the pattern of attack, which could fit into the explanation of this war from Russia. They said it's operation of demilitarization of Ukraine. And they targeted specifically military infrastructure, military bases, airports on the day 1 and 2 of this war. And this could, go with Russian explanation. But right now it's day 22 already. And they have been targeting for more than 2 weeks just civil objects, and there is no explanation of this. They tried to cover the attack on Mariupol maternity ward with the fact that Azov Nazis used these premises of this hospital as their base, military base, and were covering this base with pregnant women.
Right.
But this really does not go as an explanation for a sane explanation. So it's just crazy statement. Which
I
came
highly
out
doubt
of
if
officials.
anyone can explain the kind of atrocities that we see happening in Ukraine. A large number of civilians have been killed. The fact of the matter is that this is one of the most, or the largest humanitarian crisis in modern world, and that's what's upsetting. That in today's age, we're seeing this kind of war taking place with civilians bearing the brunt of it. Maria, please do stay with us.
Right, and one number I want to mention is that already, according to the Prosecutor General's Office of Ukraine, 103 children were already killed in this war, and the number of adults killed, of civilians killed, is yet to be shown. And the Prosecutor General's Office
That's the unfortunate part, that there is no confirmed number on the number of deaths. Many casualties have been reported from different parts of Ukraine, but confirmation on the numbers yet to come. But we're with you, of course, lauding your courage and spirit. We're only hoping that civilians are safe. That's the only prayer from around the world. I'm sure that people, of course, losing lives is not what we want to see. Maria, stay with us. We have a lot more images coming in from that war-torn country. After 3 weeks of this war that's been waged, Ukraine and Russia are now finally on the negotiation table. Ukraine, of course, expecting some progress in talks. After 4 rounds of inconclusive talks, 2 nations have now finally come down to a 15-point peace plan. Now, will the delegations from both these nations really finally broker truce here? Here's more on that.
After 21 days of raging war, there is some hope for truce. Russia and Ukraine are finally in a mood to negotiate. After 4 inconclusive rounds of talks, the 5th one seemed to be a step in the direction of peace. Russia and Ukraine are now trying to chalk out a compromise formula, including neutrality status for Ukraine as one of the options. Under neutral status, Ukraine would become part of European Union, but not NATO, like Austria and Sweden. Kremlin has given the green signal to this option.
Он сейчас, по большому счету, он сейчас всерьез обсуждается в увязке, конечно же, с гарантиями безопасности. Это ровно то, что вот президент Путин говорил в феврале на одной из своих пресс-конференций. Любые возможные варианты, любые общеприемлемые.
Kiev, however, has ruled out the Russian proposal. Ukraine wants a legally binding security pact signed by international partners. Ukrainian and Russian delegations have come up with the 15-point tentative peace plan. It lists the issue that needs to be resolved before a compromise. These include Ukraine declaring neutrality, limiting the Ukrainian armed forces, renouncing Kiev's ambitions to join NATO, and prohibiting Ukraine from hosting foreign military bases in exchange of security. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has claimed the talks are heading in the right direction.
Це важливо. Складно, але важливо, тому що будь-яка війна завершується угодою. Зустрічі тривають. Як мені доповідають, позиції на переговорах звучать вже реалістичніше. Проте ще необхідний час, щоб рішення були в інтересах саме України.
While talks are going on, Russia's relentless bombing of Ukraine continues. The question everyone is asking now is, how soon can the two warring nations reach an agreement? Bureau Report, India Today.
Now, after 21 days of ferocious Russia-Ukraine war, there is finally some hope for truce that's being seen. This comes after Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky acknowledged that Ukraine will not become a NATO member. Ukraine's bid to get NATO membership was the heart of this entire crisis. Zelensky now has also said that he sees room for some compromise in these ongoing talks with Russia. On the other hand, Kremlin has also shown signs of willingness to engage in negotiations. Here's what happened.
Millions have fled their homes. Hundreds have lost their lives. Ukraine has suffered an unprecedented human tragedy in the face of the Russian invasion. Now, after 21 days of fighting, there is hope of a truce. The man who is leading the war against mighty Vladimir Putin, Ukrainian President Zelensky, says he sees room for compromise in talks with Russia. This comes as Moscow has stepped up bombardment of Kiev, targeting even residential areas.
І працювати кожному на своєму місці, кожному, в тому числі нашим представникам, нашій делегації у переговорах з Російською Федерацією. Це важливо. Складно, але важливо, тому що будь-яка війна завершується угодою. Зустрічі тривають. Як мені доповідають, позиції на переговорах звучать вже реалістичніше. Проте ще необхідний час, щоб рішення були в інтересах саме України.
The main provocation for the war was Ukraine's bid to get membership of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Zelensky has said Ukraine will not become a member of NATO.
Зрозуміло, що Україна не є членом.
We realize that Ukraine will not become a member of NATO. We understand this. We are adequate people. Kyiv needs new formats of interaction with the West and separate security guarantees.
Я радий, що наш народ починає це розуміти.
Earlier, Russia's foreign minister had said Moscow does not aim to overthrow the Kiev government and it hopes to achieve significant progress through talks. Zelensky has climbed down and is no longer interested in NATO membership. Kremlin has shown signs of willingness to engage in negotiations. With both nations making climb down, diplomacy, it seems, will succeed in ending the war that has cost both nations heavily. Bureau Report, India Today.
Now, the Ukraine-Russian war has been raging for 3 weeks now. Moscow continues to rain missiles on Ukraine. Outmanned and outgunned Kiev is still holding fort. While the diplomatic talks are on, the world is still asking how and when will this war end? India Today decodes the 10 possible scenarios in which the war may come to an end. Here's a look.
3 weeks and peace is still a distant dream in Ukraine. Cities continue to be bombarded relentlessly by Russian missiles. As the humanitarian crisis deepens, India Today decodes the 10 possible scenarios in which the war could end. Scenario 1. Putin bombs Ukraine into submission at a massive human cost and installs a puppet government in Kiev. Scenario 2. Zelensky is forced to quit and a new government takes over in Ukraine. Scenario 3. Kiev is made neutral, irrespective of who rules it, or Ukraine is demilitarized like Austria. Scenario 4. Putin is forced to halt what he calls military operations with altered status quo, allowing talks and diplomacy to take effect. Scenario 5. Ukraine is forced to recognize the two breakaway regions of Donetsk and Luhansk, as well as Kherson, as independent regions captured by Russian forces. Scenario 6. Putin escalates war by using chemical weapons or targeting West's arms depots in neighboring Poland, prompting NATO to get involved in the war directly. Scenario 7. Putin scales back his goals in the face of a crumbling domestic economy, and Ukraine becomes what Afghanistan was to Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev, or the US and its allies after 2001. Scenario 8. Ukraine registers an unlikely heroic victory with continued little weapon support and humanitarian aid supplies from the West. Scenario 9. Sanctions by the West cripple Russia's economy, making Putin extremely unpopular, leading to an uprising in his country or even a coup taking place. Scenario 10. Cornered by NATO and the European Union and depleted of weaponry, a frustrated Putin goes for nuclear strikes, potentially leading to World War III and widespread catastrophe. Bureau Report, India Today.
All right, coming up next, children bear the cost of Putin's Ukraine invasion. At least 1 million kids have fled Ukraine in just the last 3 weeks. More details coming up next. Stay with us.
Crypto Watch brought to you by BitBNS.
As Russia declared war on Ukraine, as the world was plunged again into crisis, with the only Indian team in the real war zone.
This is Mariupol. You hear a series. Hear this sound.
I will show you a quick, so to say, bombshell room tour.
I can smell the gunpowder in the air.
And without pause, India Today totally dominates viewership and smashes the competition. When it's the world's biggest news story, there's only one gold standard of journalism. When it's the world's biggest news story, there's only one gold standard of journalism. This is Ukraine's true danger zone. Up close and fearless in Ukraine's combat zone.
You are watching India Today. You are watching India Today. You are watching.
He reports amidst the attacks.
Very close. It was just on top of us. Everybody on the ground.
He reports amidst the shellings.
Bombing is coming closer to us. Everybody's running now. Panic everywhere.
He reports from cities under siege. A special forces veteran's unmatched view of the war.
They are firing. They are firing on us now. Because I tried to show them on the camera.
Okay, you need
go, to... Go. Don't stop, bro. Don't stop.
Soldier reporter Rajesh Pawar, only on India Today.
Now, with Russia-Ukraine war entering day 22, we're looking at children who continue to remain biggest victims of this war. Invasion is now turning a child refugee every second. A data released by the UNICEF recently states that around 1.5 million children have fled from Ukraine in the past 3 weeks. As Russia intensifies its attack on Ukraine, there seems to be no end to these heartbreaking images coming to fore. Neighboring countries have also opened its doors for traumatized young refugees. For some, what was really a normal childhood just a few weeks ago has now turned into a nightmare with really uncertain future for them. Images on your screens here coming in from the capital city of Kiev, where down a dusty basement, hidden from shelling, this entire shelter has now become a home for newborns. The place hosts at least 21 newborn babies, surrogate babies. Nurses there taking care of these babies as fighting has made this quite impossible for their parents to reach out to them. Their future uncertain.
More than 200 schools, around 35 hospitals, and hundreds of residential buildings, possibly close to 2,000, have been destroyed since the war began in Ukraine. Towns and villages across the eastern half of the besieged country do not have electricity and water. And in the intense cold of the snow-covered terrain, there is no heat. Millions of ordinary Ukrainians are hiding in bunkers and shelters, shivering in the cold uncertainty of mounting loss. UNICEF has put up this appeal on their landing page on Ukraine. Children in Ukraine are facing a deadly crisis as the hostilities in their country are increasing. Like all conflicts, this is turning into a children's crisis, and they will need as much humanitarian support and help as we can provide. UNICEF says there are 7.5 million children in Ukraine, and the war poses an immediate threat to their lives and well-being. With the intensifying of indiscriminate bombing of civilian targets, lives are being lost, and some of them are children. On 7th of March, human rights sources inside Ukraine released actual numbers of children killed, 38 dead and 71 injured. The survivors are rushing to the borders, clad in their winter clothing, holding on to their mothers or elders, trusting hands clasping those of adults, making unplanned journeys to the unknown, to faraway lands where strangers try and make them feel welcome.
Just 2 days ago, we had a transport of 700 kids. And, it's not easy to find a place for anybody, but it's even tougher to find a place for 700 kids in the same one place.
As their homes and lives are torn apart by other unseen strangers, firing big guns from somewhere beyond the dreadful horizon. Natasha, a 16-year-old Ukrainian refugee from before this war even started, writes, "The war came to us and happiness is no more than a ghost from my dreams." Natasha used to live in the seaside village of Shirokne in eastern Ukraine. The last time she saw her house, she was 11. Natasha writes, Our hearts are full of sadness. We have no home. The night is black. Every day that the war in Ukraine goes on, every day that the bombs rain from above, every time another school goes up in flames, and every bullet that takes a parent away, another Natasha's heart fills with sadness. 100 hearts sad, and the night stays black.
Let's quickly cut across to Olga. She's a journalist from Lviv, bringing us an insight into what the kind of suffering that Ukrainians are facing currently amid this war. Olga, thank you very much for speaking to us. We're really happy to see you safe. What the reports of many children falling victim to this war here is really heart-wrenching, heartbreaking, in fact. We see that several surrogate babies are right now in a bomb shelter in areas where there's been constant shelling. Would you give us an understanding on this large-scale humanitarian crisis that unfolds in cities, particularly Kharkiv and Kiev?
Well, that is not only Kharkiv and Kiev and Mariupol, first of all. I mean, my heart, it's heartbreaking. I can't watch the videos from there. And this is one of the points why there is the high need of humanitarian corridors, and the Russian side, which attacks humanitarian corridors. We had a number of attempts to create them. They are doing and violating all possible ways of making war, and also attacking. Yesterday there was just horrible attack on Mariupol theater, where they were also written that kids are there. So this war has the huge effect on civilians, and Russia knows where, and Russian soldiers, pilots know where they are putting bombs, as we see from the recordings from them. That is why, they know whom they bomb. They know that there are kids, civilians there, and therefore kids are suffering so much.
Right. Olga, this goes contrary to those reports and claims by Russia that they're not targeting civilians. But do you believe this is a deliberate attempt to break the spirit and the courage of Ukrainian civilians who are now, in fact, standing as soldiers, doubling up as the army of Ukraine to fight for their country? Do you think this is an attempt to threaten and deter the spirit of those who remain in Ukraine?
Well, it's the barbaric steps. I just have no words. Why are they doing this? Because their claims, they are unjustified. Like the cars are marked that there are kids inside. There is the photo from yesterday where it is written you can see from above that there are kids inside. And there is no claims that Ukrainian army doesn't use kids and civilians as a shield. That's a false claim. And yesterday's decision of ECJ proved that Russia used all the claims to justify the war. They are false. These are the reasons. So I have no words to justify what they are doing. They see, and we have recordings, for example, from those Russian soldiers when they are speaking, and also their documents. There are evidences that show that they know what they are hitting. They know what these targets are, and so I have no words to justify them, and I don't know why they do this.
Right. Olga, stay with us. We also have Sergei, who's been bringing us all the factual reports on ground. He's in the capital city of Kiev. Sergei, even as talks continue between the two countries, we hear that there seems to be some progress in those talks. There could be some compromise that Ukraine could come to. While that said, how far and how threatened is Kiev as Ukrainian troops still remain put in those areas around the border of Kiev?
Good morning, studio. Good morning, India. The last 2 days were announced by Russians as it's they're like a super time for attacking Kiev from all the sizes, and that's why Kiev was on some kind of lockdown for this time. But as we see, it doesn't have a result for the Russians. Our air forces doing their job very well. Unfortunately, during these 2 days, there was some rocket partisan attacks on civilian buildings in Kiev, in downtown, in suburb. Unfortunately, some people died on these attacks. And about your first question about the negotiation between two countries, I can't predict, but I see people, I see their eyes, like when everywhere I see them, in the shelters, in the stores, in the street, in the cars, on the block posts, regular army. We see them, we're talking with them, and I'm sure in their heart they believe only in the victory. In the victory, which can give Ukraine chance to celebrate their victory day for the future periods of the history. And our government, our president, for sure, he knows all this united hearts in Kiev, in Ukraine, all over the world. So they will do their best in these negotiations for the future, for the peace, not only in Ukraine, but in the whole world.
You know, peace is something that Ukrainians are currently desperate for. It seems like the world is also hoping and praying that this comes to an end at the earliest, because this is really the largest humanitarian crisis in modern world. While we see that, we know that Ukrainians are fleeing in numbers. They are trying to escape those combat zones and several of those intense war-torn areas. Would you believe that Ukrainian spirit is still strong, even on day 22 of this war? Those who have left behind, who are left behind, who've chosen to stay.
I'll tell you even much more. This spirit is increasing from day to day. And you know, like if to like just imagine previously, people were talking about lots of things, about job, about the traffic, about the politics in Ukraine, all over Ukraine. Right now, everybody is asking, how was your night? How was everything? We did this, we are ready for this. Here is the result of our attacks. Here is the result of our defense. So all the people, they're united. They're gathering around this problem caused by Russians and their enormous spirit to destroy all normal standards in the world. I'm saying normal standards because they used to say their marketing of their country used to say that they're a very European country, peaceful, strong. But we see that they crucially attacked Ukraine 22 days ago. And if Ukraine must to pay by their blood of the citizens for the independence in this century, I sure we're ready. So our spirit is increasing from day to day, and we will share this spirit with the whole world, as I said before.
Right. Sergei, we know that Russia has been, right from the start, demanding that Ukraine does not become a NATO member. Now it appears that the Ukrainian President Zelensky has decided to step down. Now, whether it's a decision that's been declared already as yet, you can confirm that for us. But this is what Ukraine is now mulling over, to step down from insisting on becoming a NATO member. Is that because of this war that's been unleashed and the kind of onslaught that you have received? Or is it now that you all have decided that NATO countries haven't stepped up enough, and since you haven't got the required help, might as well go with negotiation and a compromise with Russia? Maybe Olga can come in on that.
We see the result of today's geopolitics from NATO, from United Nations, from partners from Asia. It doesn't work like this anymore. We cannot, unfortunately, take our borders and change our neighbors and, I don't know, transfer Ukraine to Australia, to India, whatever. We will live near to Russia, near to Belarus, the same as Poland will live near to Ukraine and other European countries will be. And we are talking not about if we will be the member of NATO or not. We just need a safeness guarantee. If we will not have them,
For you local civilians there, Sergei, does it matter at all if you are a member of NATO or not?
At this moment, our biggest issue with NATO is the close the sky. That's all. We don't asking people to fight for Ukraine.
But that hasn't happened. NATO hasn't ordered for the airspace to be shut. Has that let you down?
I repeat again, we're not asking people to fight for Ukraine, but they're coming by themselves. We are asking just to support us by the military stuff.
And we hear that there is a lot of military aid coming in from many of those NATO countries. Stay with us. Olga, would you want to step in on that? Do you feel let down by NATO's response on this war, since y'all have requested for airspace to be shut, which ideally, if NATO wants, can order this, but they expect an escalation in war, considering Russia is a nuclear superpower. They're holding back. Has that let you down at all?
No, this hasn't let me down at all. And as I know, the negotiations are still ongoing. So maybe we will have something will go better or so. But anyway, I guess I need to stress the point that both NATO and EU membership is in our constitution, and like the polls before the war were that Ukrainians were for entering both alliances. But you should understand that in this war, Ukrainians are not fighting for the membership or for anything. They're fighting for their future and for them to be makers of their future. So the decision to enter NATO or not to enter, or to get some guarantees, are on Ukrainians. And this is the main point. And so Ukrainians are fighting for their land and fighting for their future. And this is the main thing, I guess, to understand. And this is why the morale of the Ukrainian army and of the civilians, of all the citizens, is so high, because we are not fighting for any alliance, for anything. We're fighting just for our freedom and for our land, for us to decide for ourselves.
Well, talks are currently underway, and from what we hear now, that Zelensky could be looking at a compromise. They're no more insisting on becoming a NATO member. Russia, they're of course pushing for neutral status for Ukraine, and that's what they claim. That's where the war started, and that's the only demand that they really want Ukraine to meet. Now, will both sides agree to it? Bilateral talks continue even as bombardment, firing, blasts still take place in several parts of Ukraine. Really heartbreaking to see that beautiful country ravaged. Let me cut across to a short break. Thank you very much, Olga and Sergei, for joining us. We're going to come back to you with more on that. But here's India Today, bringing you all those images right from day 1 to day 22 of this invasion. Russia shows no signs of de-escalation. We're looking at several cities, including Kharkiv, Kiev, Mariupol, and few others around that area that have been completely ravaged, devastated. Even on day 22, shelling, bombing take place unabated. We're going to continue bringing these visuals on the other side of a short break. Do stay with us.
Crypto Watch brought to you by BitBNS.
As Russia declared war on Ukraine, as the world was plunged again into crisis, with the only Indian team in the real war zone.
This is Mariupol. You hear a series. Hear this sound.
I will show you a quick, so to say, bombshell room tour.
I can smell the gunpowder in the air.
And without pause, India Today totally dominates viewership and smashes the competition. When it's the world's biggest news story, there's only one gold standard of journalism. When it's the world's biggest news story, there's only one gold standard of journalism. This is Ukraine's true danger zone. Up close and fearless in Ukraine's combat zone.
You are watching India Today. You are watching India Today.
What is there outside of Earth? Space, infinite space. And did you know the race to conquer space has been man's never-ending struggle? Of strategic and political significance, the conquest of space generated intense competition between the US and the Soviet Union during the Cold War. In 1957, the Soviets were first to place a satellite, Sputnik, into orbit. A few weeks later, a dog became the first living creature in space. Laika unfortunately didn't survive the journey. In 1961, Soviet astronaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human to orbit the Earth. In 1963, his compatriot Valentina Tereshkova became the first woman in space. In 1969, the Apollo 11 mission made it possible for Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin to walk on the moon. In the 1970s, competition gave way to US-Soviet cooperation. Apollo and Soyuz capsules docked in orbit. In those days, man was also dreaming of Mars. In 1976, US probes Viking 1 and 2 landed on the Red Planet. The following year, space probes Voyager 1 and 2 lifted off on their mission to explore the solar system. In 1981, the era of reusable spacecraft began. This period was marked by disasters for Challenger in 1986 and Columbia in 2003. The Hubble telescope was launched in 1919. The construction of the International Space Station began 400 kilometers above the Earth, making long stays in space possible. In 2001, space was no longer the preserve of defense and science. The first tourist in space, American Dennis Tito, relaxed in the ISS. Since the start of the century, new private companies have shaken up the space industry. SpaceX and Blue Origin are developing reusable spacecraft to return to the moon and one day Mars.
You are watching.
From the break of war,
This is Mariupol. You hear a series. Hear this sound.
through the debris and devastation.
You can hear more blasts that are taking place. We are moving away from this area. We are being told to leave this area because it's not safe to be here. You can hear some blasts that are taking place.
Please close the sky.
Close the sky. That's the message.
Over the roar of war machines.
We're very careful, Pawan, very careful. These are anti-tank mines that are laid on the road here.
Continuous firing taking place.
No compromise, no half measures.
उन्होंने हमारे ऊपर हथियार तान के रखा है.
This is one of the frontline areas where trenches have been dug up, bunkers have been set. They're all prepared, all set to take on the Russian forces.
The world watched the Ukraine war only on India Today. In association with
Green Lamb Laminates, Gustakhi Saaf.
Visuals, shocking visuals coming in from different parts of Ukraine, right from day 1 to day 10. These images here carry on a sorry story, even till date on day 22 of this war. Here, the first 10 days of devastation and destruction, but 22 days later, that does not seem to de-escalate. Signs of escalation coming even on day 22 as the port city of Mariupol has been bombed extensively. A theatre has been damaged today that housed several civilians. It was a shelter and despite that has been targeted at. These visuals here, a number of buildings that has been completely destroyed. The havoc and devastation coming from day 1 all the way to day 10 of war in Ukraine. And here are the visuals coming in from day 11 all the way to day 18. These visuals on your screens here capturing mass destruction, intense shelling and airstrikes from day 11 all the way to day 18 of this Russian invasion. India Today bringing you all those details from those combat zones where civilians have managed to flee. Many more have decided to stay back even amid this widespread destruction. And from day 19 all the way to day 22, Ukraine has now battled raining missiles, non-stop bombardments and air raids. Here's a look at the war wrath unleashed on Ukraine. India Today continues its relentless coverage even on day 22. I'm Nabila Jamal. First, the top headlines. It's day 22 of Russia's invasion, but Putin's guns are far from silent. Air raids, missiles rain misery on Kharkiv. Capital Kiev witnesses barrage of rocket strikes. Hopes of diplomacy between Russia and Ukraine rise amid devastation. Putin claims success after Ukraine's NATO shift. ICJ orders Russia to stop invasion. Zelensky calls it a big win. And truce in the horizon. After 3 weeks of devastating war, Russia and Ukraine zero in on 15-point peace plan. India Today decodes 10 possible outcomes in this war. United States sending Switchblade suicide drones to Ukraine to counter Russian kamikaze drones, which are slipping past Ukraine's air defense. And children bear the cost of Putin's Ukraine invasion, war creating a child refugee every second. At least 1 million kids have fled Ukraine in just the last 3 weeks. Now, the Russian invasion on Ukraine has left the country in ruins. Houses have been burned, commercial establishments have been destroyed. The horrifying visuals here that you see on your screens have emerged from many of those combat zones that shows the earlier images where we saw the city fully flourished, and now large-scale devastation, their extensive damage that we see in those cities. The city of Mariupol has suffered significant damage to this urban infrastructure. The before and after images showing destruction that have been caused by Russian troops. Residential buildings, commercial establishments have been destroyed after back-to-back strikes. Another city that has been one of the worst hit is Chernihiv. After deadly attacks hit the city over the last 22 days, the streets of the city now filled with dead bodies. Horrifying images of locals carrying the injured and dead have surfaced that shows fatal aftermath of these attacks. And now a town in Donetsk region, Makikwa, is now in complete ruins. Residential buildings, market areas charred due to repeated shelling by Russian army. Locals can be seen working together to repair the damage caused by brutal Russian attacks. In Mariupol, a drama theatre became shelter for thousands of Ukrainians in that city, but Russians have bombed that theatre with people inside. Every single person taking refuge inside that hospital was trapped under debris. No count of the number of casualties has taken place due to the bombings. A confirmation is yet awaited. The visuals on your screens here is that of the theatre before the war, and that destruction now really showing the intensity of these attacks. Now, let me quickly cut across to our panelists joining us. Maria, also Rostislav, thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Maria, if you can give us an understanding into these diplomatic talks that are currently underway with both the countries now looking at a compromise after 22 days of relentless bombarding. What do you expect from these talks, and do you see Ukraine coming to a compromise and stepping down from some of your key demands?
I'm sure, hello, good morning. I'm sure the compromise is Russia to withdraw their heavy weapon, to withdraw their Russian troops, to get out from our land, to get out from our country. This is such a compromise. And all that 15 points which you have named, these points are from Russia's side. We demand ceasefire. We demand Russian troops leave our territory. As you have mentioned, Mariupol, the sign on the theater, the signs were children, because more than 1,500 people and children were in this dramatic theater in their shelters. So Putin, he is a neo-Nazi leader who is killing our children, our women, and our elder people. And he is a war criminal, and that is why no compromise. His place in international court and all his military people also. That is why regarding neutral status, no neutral status for Ukraine. It's capitulation. We have already in our constitution Euro-Atlantic integration. And our people, our nation now are dying to be democratic, to be European, to be transparent, and to be in NATO, as that is a security for the whole region. That is why I see also how your probably rhetoric also on your channel is changing. And I thank you that you see this tragic and you see this reality, what is going on in 21st century. Mariupol now, it's an example what Putin would like to provide with the whole Ukraine.
Right.
And that is why we are calling for the whole world to stop Putin, to isolate him. More sanctions.
Right.
More sanctions on Putin.
Stiff sanctions have been imposed on Putin, but doesn't seem like it's deterred Russia from sending its troops in numbers. They now have encircled the capital city of Kiev, while on the other hand, they're trying to hold talks and come to a compromise. Rostislav, who's also joining us from Kiev, would you be able to tell us if all that help that's coming in from the Western countries in terms of aid, military aid for you, and the kind of money that's been pumped in by the United States so far, is that enough help, or are you requesting and appealing for more in this trying time for you?
Well, good afternoon for all. First and foremost, the city of Kiev is not encircled. Ukrainian army is holding the invaders off the western and eastern outskirts of the city, and it is still not in the encirclement, and hopefully it will not be, because we see what happens next stage. Mariupol is a perfect example. When the Russian army gets close enough to use artillery, to use rocket launchers, it starts to erase the city. We saw it in Kharkiv also. We see it in Chernihiv, in Sumy. So it is vital to hold them off. And for this actual result, we need all the assistance. We are thankful to the partners for everything that is coming to help Ukraine. And we ask for a sort of a lend-lease, as we saw in the Second World War, when the nations of the free world helped the nations incumbent, the Great Britain, the Soviet Union at those times, and others who were fighting the Nazis. And as my colleague rightfully says, Putin is a neo-Nazist now, because he is using the very same methods and very same kind of war. He is attacking civilians, he is bombarding shelters, he is cutting off humanitarian convoys, and he should be stopped by the same means as Hitler was stopped 80 years ago.
Right. We also have Alexei, who's joining us, an MP from Kiev. Alexei, we know that in Mariupol, there's been constant bombing, and a theater that was housing close to 1,000 or more civilians who were using that as shelter has now been fully targeted at. We are not certain on the number of casualties. Would you be able to elaborate on what happened there?
Hello, my name is Alexei Goncharenko, and I'm a member of the parliament. I'm now in Odessa. And I say hello to Rostislav, my colleague, Rostislav Pavlenko. And speaking about Mariupol, that's absolutely horrific situation which happens there. And Putin is just destroying 500,000 population city. The number of casualties is in thousands. And it's just a terror. Yesterday, big theater in which people were hiding from bombing. And all around where it was written that children are inside. So it was seen also from air, but Russians, nevertheless, they bombed it. And we have again, many casualties. We even don't know the number, because the rubles is still in the place, and because there are fightings in the city, the rescue teams just could not clean these rubles. So that's the situation in Ukraine. That's the horror which is going on. And I'm sorry that Indian government didn't vote in favor of resolution against this war in the United Nations. I can't understand why. This war is against humanity.
This war is seeing large-scale humanitarian crisis unfold in modern world. This kind of devastation that we see where civilians are bearing the brunt is really heartbreaking. Maria, over to you on the kind of stories that you're hearing. We know that many Ukrainians have managed to flee. Many more have stayed back. But at a time like this, what would be your appeal to those citizens to stay or to leave? With this kind of constant shelling, what would be your responsibility as an administration?
First of all, I'd like to add some information regarding Mariupol, which my colleagues also has mentioned, regarding humanitarian green corridors. Yesterday, it was agreed that by private cars, the inhabitants of Mariupol can leave. But again, Russian troops, they shooted, there were shellings from Grad to these civilian cars, where of course the majority are children and women. And so that's terror by Putin. Again, we here are not able by ourselves to stop him, and that is why I mentioned it previously in previous our meetings. But really, Indian government also has to be strong and brave in their position regarding evacuation. 18 million people are suffering from the war. It's UN numbers. 8 million people became IDPs in Ukraine, and almost 3,500,000 people left Ukraine. Of course, it's women and children. But it depends also on the democratic and civilian world, free world, how many people, how many civilians have to leave our country, because there is no safe place where to hide from attacks, from bombing, from the biggest bombs from Russian Federation. And that is why it's also a question to you, what you can do to help our people to stay in Ukraine. Because as you know, even after invasion and annexation of Crimea in 2014, our people, which Europeans and other countries were so worried, they didn't become any refugee crisis, any migrations crisis. We were all in our country. We were all fighting for our independence and our prosperity. That is why I also would like to ask the whole free world, how many people have to leave more our country, that you pay attention and help us with the land lease, with the weapon, with the artillery system. And, this is a humanitarian aid from these countries. Thank you.
Maria, we see a large-scale international outrage, the kind of sanctions that have been imposed on Russia. One hoped that it would deter their spirit or their attempts to invade Ukraine and in such a manner, but unfortunately it seems like they've stepped up attack. There has been no signs of de-escalation so far. If I can take that to Oleski, please give us an understanding of the kind of talks between the two countries. We know that Ukraine now has finally decided to come to a compromise, isn't insisting anymore of becoming a NATO member. But for civilians and for all of you, is it really important at this moment to decide on being a NATO member or not? Does it even matter, considering NATO hasn't stepped in to the extent that you all expected for?
First of all, about sanctions. Yes, the sanctions are imposed, but no one sanctions from Indian government, as I know. I don't know any sanction from Indian government. And I think it's not right when such things are happening. And India also knows how brutal can be dictatorships and how dangerous they can be. So I believe that India should also join free world here. Speaking about compromises and peace negotiations, I don't believe in these peace negotiations, unfortunately, for the moment, because Putin, as any aggressor, understands only force. And before his losses will be so terrible that he could not continue his attack in any way, I think he will not join any real peace negotiations. Speaking about NATO, it's absolutely fake story. Putin started the war against Ukraine in 2014, when Ukraine was absolutely neutral country without no intention to join NATO. And it has not stopped Putin. It had not stopped Putin at all. Today, the new invasion started and we are not member of NATO again. So, and we are not even candidates to be a member of NATO. We don't even have a membership action plan or things like this. So Putin is not trying to defend Russia from Ukraine being member of NATO. He's trying to destroy Ukraine. That's what he's trying to do. So all these stories about NATO and that will change something, that will not change anything. It's a fake story.
Right. You know, we hear you, and India Today has been extensively capturing all that's unfolding from Ukraine. We're bringing voices from Ukraine. It's for the world to see. Thank you very much. Really, prayers are with you, the civilians of Ukraine who are really fighting and resisting Russia's offensive. Maria, Oleksiy and Rostislav, really appreciate your time. Now, we do know this is the 22nd day of war in Ukraine. The invasion still continues. Attack in many cities there, showing large-scale devastation, and those are the visuals that are coming in even on the 22nd day of this war. The city of Kharkiv continues to be the worst hit here. A market in Kharkiv was bombed, following which the fire raged on for hours, with smoke engulfing nearby buildings as well. Russia has released a video of their brutal airstrikes on Ukraine. The video shows missile attacks that burn an area into ashes within just minutes. A theatre there where hundreds took shelter was bombed. All people who took refuge in the theatre are trapped in debris. Capital city of Kiev continues to face back-to-back attacks. A rocket that hit a residential area has also been destroyed in the neighborhood, but Ukrainians refuse to give up. Their resistance has also caused significant damage to Russian military. Ukraine attacked Russian tanks that were firing at shelters across the city of Mariupol. Now, the city has also been hard hit by Russian shells, air bombs. Ukraine also shot down a Russian chopper at Mykolaiv. Now, amid non-stop shelling in Ukraine and loss of life and property, there are hopes of truce between the two nations. Reports here suggest that Ukraine and Russia have made a 15-point peace plan that includes a ceasefire and withdrawal of Russian troops, of Ukraine declaring neutrality, and will confirm that they will not join NATO. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin has said that the country has succeeded in their Ukraine operation. Putin has also said that Russia has no plans to occupy Ukraine and that the operation was done for self-defense. Now, these remarks come shortly after the International Court of Justice slammed Russia in its ruling. The ICJ has said that Russia should suspend all its military operations and also ensure that any military or armed units supported by it take no further steps to continue. Now, this order has been passed. It will have a binding effect and invokes international legal obligations of the state. The court has further asked both the nations to refrain from any action that may escalate this situation. Now, reacting to the International Court of Justice's verdict, Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that Ukraine has gained complete victory in court, adding that if Russia fails to comply, it will isolate itself further.
Переговори заради України, мої пріоритети на переговорах абсолютно зрозумілі. Завершення війни, гарантії безпеки, суверенітет, відновлення територіальної цілісності. Реальні гарантії для нашої країни, реальний захист для нашої країни.
Ukraine is grateful to the United States for its overwhelming support, for everything US government and your people have done for us, for weapons and ammunition, for training, for finances, for leadership in the free world which helps us to pressure Russia. I'm grateful to President Biden for his personal involvement, for his sincere commitment to the defense of Ukraine and democracy all over the world. I'm grateful to you for the resolution which recognizes all those who commit crime against Ukraine, Ukrainian people as war criminals. However, now it is true in the darkest time for our country, for the whole Europe, I call on you to do more. New packages of sanctions are needed constantly every week until the Russian military machine stops.
Now, after 3 weeks of waging war, Ukraine and Russia are finally on the negotiation table. After 4 rounds of inconclusive talks, the two nations have now come down to a 15-point peace plan. Will deliberations in all this talk here really finally broker truce between the two nations? Here's a listen.
After 21 days of raging war, there is some hope for truce. Russia and Ukraine are finally in a mood to negotiate. After 4 inconclusive rounds of talks, the fifth one seemed to be a step in the direction of peace. Russia and Ukraine are now trying to chalk out a compromise formula, including neutrality status for Ukraine as one of the options. Under neutral status, Ukraine would become part of European Union, but not NATO, like Austria and Sweden. Kremlin has given the green signal to this option.
Он сейчас, по большому счету, он сейчас всерьез обсуждается в увязке, конечно же, с гарантиями безопасности. Это ровно то, что вот президент Путин говорил в феврале на одной из своих пресс-конференций. Любые возможные варианты, любые общеприемлемые.
Kiev, however, has ruled out the Russian proposal. Ukraine wants a legally binding security pact signed by international partners. Ukrainian and Russian delegations have come up with the 15-point tentative peace plan. It lists the issue that needs to be resolved before a compromise. These include Ukraine declaring neutrality, limiting the Ukrainian armed forces, renouncing Kiev's ambitions to join NATO, and prohibiting Ukraine from hosting foreign military bases in exchange of security. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has claimed the talks are heading in the right direction.
Це важливо. Складно, але важливо, тому що будь-яка війна завершується угодою. Зустрічі тривають. Як мені доповідають, позиції на переговорах звучать вже реалістичніше. Проте ще необхідний час, щоб рішення були в інтересах саме України.
While talks are going on, Russia's relentless bombing of Ukraine continues. The question everyone is asking now is, how soon can the two warring nations reach an agreement? Bureau Report, India Today.
All right, coming up next now, war wreaks havoc on Ukraine's Mariupol, the port city. Last hospital burning with corpses. More details and images coming up on the other side. Do stay with us.
As Russia declared war on Ukraine, as the world was plunged again into crisis, with the only Indian team in the real war zone.
This is Mariupol. You hear a series. Hear the sound.
I will show you a quick, so to say, bombshell room tour.
I can smell the gunpowder in the air.
And without pause, India Today totally dominates viewership and smashes the competition. When it's the world's biggest news story, there's only one gold standard of journalism.
All eyes on the Ukraine-Russia crisis. Tensions are rising in Ukraine as Russia inches closer to taking over Ukraine. If Ukraine collapses, will NATO offer help to Ukraine? What is NATO's response force? With 40,000 soldiers available for fast mobilization, the response force is NATO's armed wing. Operational since 2004, it carries out humanitarian missions, evacuations, crisis management, defense, and terrorism response operations. It consists of units from NATO's 30 members who rotate in and out on 12-month increments while remaining based in their own countries. Its operational command alternates between the Allied Joint Force Commands based in Runsum in the Netherlands and Naples in Italy. The response force consists of land, air, sea and special operations forces for fighting recce and anti-terrorism missions. There is also a battalion trained to deal with industrial accidents, including biological and nuclear. Since 2014, the reaction force has had an elite corps known as the Very High Readiness Joint Task Force with some 20,000 soldiers. This consists of a land brigade of around 5,000 troops supported by air, sea and special forces. These can deploy within 2 or 3 days.
Now, devastating scenes at the last hospital in Mariupol. The lone hospital, standing as all others, were bombed out by Russia. Bodies pile up as those doctors couldn't save. Most of them there currently bleeding with injuries. They've lined up in the basement since the mortuary in the city is now full to the brink of it. Hospital is now serving as emergency centers, maternity ward and morgue. The dead include large numbers of infants. The injured, many of whom are grievously hurt, in fact, most of them have filled up every nook and corner of the hospital. It's just the most heart-wrenching footage that we see of this war. Earlier reports claim that Russian troops had taken some patients hostage at some of the hospitals. The besieged Mariupol has endured some of Ukraine's worst misery since Russia has unleashed its full-scale invasion on the 24th of February. The city has been subject to heavy Russian bombardment, with more than 2,500 people, including children, have been killed. Now, with Russia-Ukraine war entering day 22, children continue to remain the biggest victims of this war. The invasion is now turning a child refugee every second. Data released by UNICEF recently states that around 1.5 million children have fled Ukraine in the past 3 weeks. As Russia intensifies its attack on Ukraine, there seems no end to this heartbreaking images. The neighboring countries have now finally opened their doors for traumatized young refugees. For some, what was normal childhood just a few weeks ago has now turned into a massive nightmare with uncertain futures for them. Images on your screens here coming in from the city of Kiev, where down a dusty basement, hidden from shelling, many of them using that a shelter, a safety spot. Many newborns have been housed in that shelter. This place hosts now 21 newborn babies to surrogates. Nurses are taking care of them as fighting there continues to take place, makes it all the more impossible for many of those parents to come and unite with their children. Now we have Anton, Ukrainian representative at The Hague, joining us for a little perspective there. Anton, here the humanitarian crisis that we see unfolding has been really heartbreaking. We see at least 21 surrogate babies who are housed in a shelter. They have no way to meet with their parents. Many kids so far in this war have been killed. The kind of information that's coming in on a daily basis really leaves us wondering, when is this war going to end?
Well, hello. Unfortunately, I might not say when the war is going to end, because it depends when the Russian Federation will halt, will suspend its military activity operations in Ukraine and will terminate this aggression. But we know that we need to be active on the legal side, and with our lawfare, how we call it, when the Russian Federation considers and uses warfare against Ukraine, we are using lawfare. And yesterday, as you know, the International Court of Justice in The Hague made an order on provisional measures in which it strictly obliged the Russian Federation to immediately suspend the military operations in the territory of Ukraine, and that all the regular Russian military units and all the other organized armed groups, organizations, or private natural persons who act under the control of Russia shall immediately suspend all the military activities on the territory of Ukraine.
These are appeals going out, but this hasn't really stopped Russia from advancing towards Ukraine and in full might. Even you have United States President Joe Biden calling Putin now a war criminal. This hasn't gone down well. This has really led to Russia to all the more up their offensive, is what we've seen as a pattern even on day 22.
You know, we have to do it. I mean, I might not say whether Russia will immediately suspend that operation, but we know that all the international organizations and a lot of international courts like the European Court of Human Rights and now the International Court of Justice, the principal judicial organ of the United Nations, where Russia is a member, has proclaimed this order and has obliged Russia to do this. And Russia must do this. So this is a legal obligation which Russia must fulfill. So, I mean, by having this decision, we see that Russia is alone and that whole the world, international community and international organizations, and which is more important, international courts with judicial decisions, with legally binding decisions, say that Russia must cease, must halt all the military operations in Ukraine, that they are totally illegal.
You know, here we're looking at Ukraine, we believe now, as they're on the negotiation table, both the countries are trying to look for a compromise. While that said, here Russia is pushing for neutral status for Ukraine. We believe so far Ukraine hasn't agreed to it. But Ukraine also now not demanding and insisting that they want to continue or they want to join as a NATO member. That demand has now been almost silent for the last few days of this war. Where do you see this head towards, the negotiation right now that is underway?
Well, I'm sure that negotiations are needed because every war, every international armed conflict ends with negotiations and peace. And surely our country now needs peace. But these negotiations need to be fair, need to finalize with some legal acts which would have legal effects and which will be binding for the states, and that Ukraine will have guarantees of our security. I am not a part of the team which negotiates with Russia, so I cannot really comment a lot on this issue. But I know that the team is really doing a great job in the sense that it's very hard to negotiate with Russia, but it is needed. So all the other peculiarities, really, only the members of the team know them. And I, as every other citizen of Ukraine, we are waiting for the results of that.
We know that Ukrainians have been closely watching those developments when it comes to talks between the two sides. A lot of talk about Ukraine now wanting to step down on their main demand, which is they're no more insisting to join the NATO. Now, Ukraine's President Zelensky is to confirm this, but this is the information that we get on ground as our reporters have extensively covered this war-torn zone. Thank you very much, Anton, for joining us with those details. India Today's relentless coverage here continuing even on day 22 of this war. Coming up on the other side, Russia, they're intensifying its attack on Ukraine. It's now time to see some of those haunting images right after a short break. Stay with us.
Rahul Kanwal, 23 years of experience, 5 conflicts covered, unmatched time in war zone.
The first embedded operation in the history of Indian television journalism.
Gaurav Sawant, 28 years of reporting, 8 conflicts covered, unmatched hours in conflict areas.
Actual firing is taking place, the grads are firing.
Shivarur, 19 years of reporting, 5 conflicts covered, unmatched view of international crossfires.
And the attack guns are firing away.
Geeta Mohan, 18 years of reporting, 3 conflicts covered. When the world is at war, there is no compromise on India Today.
reports amidst the attacks.
Very close. It was just on top of us. Everybody on the ground.
He reports amidst the shellings.
Bombing is coming closer to us. Everybody's running now. Panic everywhere.
He reports from cities under siege. A special forces veteran's unmatched view of the war.
They're fighting. They're fighting on us now. Because I tried to show them on the camera.
Okay, you need
go, Go. Don't stop, no, don't stop.
Soldier reporter Rajesh Pawar, only on India Today.
Now, as Russia intensifies its attack on Ukraine, it's now time to see some of those haunting images that has convulsed the whole wide world. Here are 3 people who were killed, 5 wounded after shelling caused a fire at a market area in eastern Ukrainian city of Kharkiv. These images on your screens here show the extent of destruction after heavy shelling by Russian troops. You can see fire all over, plumes of smoke and charred vehicles from this war-torn zone. Russian occupiers have shelled a school in Kharkiv. You can see the damaged school building and a series of damaged cars. There is no sign of human life. Trees there that have been completely uprooted, piles of rubble, scattered lumps of concrete left behind after the attack. And moment of horror caught on cameras. Images on your screens here show heavy shelling by Russian forces in Kharkiv late last night. Russian shelling and bombing led to multiple explosions in Kharkiv. Several buildings and vehicles were destroyed in this attack. Ukraine continues to fight back. On your screens here is wrecked parts of a crashed Russian aircraft which was shot down by the Ukrainian troops in Mykolaiv. No confirmations of belongings of the pilot as yet. And devastating scenes coming at the last hospital in Mariupol, the port city. The lone hospital standing as all others have been bombed out by Russia. You can see bodies that have been piled up all over the place. The dead includes large numbers of infants and women. Russian troops dropped a powerful bomb on a theater in the encircled Ukrainian port city of Mariupol. According to reports, more than 1,000 people, including women and children, were taking shelter at that time. It's unfortunate. No exact number of casualties has been reported yet, but this footage here on your screen shows the destruction of that theater once after it was bombed.
Вот, блядь, смотрите, пидорасы, блядь.
Overnight shelling wreaks havoc in Kharkiv. Images on your screens here show you moments when city was attacked by Russian forces. You can see buildings and shops on fire. Huge plumes of smoke can also be seen coming from those destroyed buildings. And Ukrainian media has now released a video on Wednesday claiming Russian troops opened fire on people who were standing in line for bread in the Ukrainian city of Chernihiv. The video on your screens here shows dead bodies lying on the ground. Ukraine's media has claimed that at least 10 people were killed in this incident. India Today, independently, have not been able to verify this video. The Russian Defense Ministry released a video on Wednesday. It shows armored vehicles, tanks and other military equipment, including foreign-made anti-tank rocket launchers allegedly captured by Russian troops. And these images are from the capital city of Kiev. Ukrainians getting rescued after Russian troops attacked at a residential area. According to reports, 1 person has been killed in the attacks. 3 of them have been injured. Emergency service departments right now trying to manage and evacuate at least 30 people from that building that has now come under constant shelling by Russian forces. Russian Defense Ministry has shared a video of an airstrike on a Ukrainian missile and artillery warehouse on Wednesday. And according to Moscow, the airstrike was carried out by a high-precision missile system of the Russian armed forces. Now, the warehouse was completely destroyed, and this aerial view shows the extent of damage. Non-stop shelling has completely devastated separatist-controlled town Makayivka in Ukraine. Visuals on your screens here shows the aftermath of attacks, damaged cars, destroyed vehicles, broken windows. Life there has come to a complete standstill. And this video on your screens has been released by Ukrainian forces. It shows broken and abandoned equipment of Russian forces in Kiev suburbs, Bucha. Ukraine has now claimed that Russian troops used residential buildings as shelters. And the visuals on your screens here are from the capital city of Kiev, where 21 babies born to surrogates are kept safe in a basement. Nurses are taking care of those babies because fighting has now made this nearly impossible for parents of these babies to reach them, from toddlers to children to elderly people. War really has spared no one. And Russia continues to target civilians. The image on your screens here is from Mariupol. You can see a Russian tank firing at a civilian. And according to reports, invaders have pounded on residential areas of the besieged city. Another horrific video exposes Russia. Image on your screens showing invaders shooting down a civilian who raised his hands up while trying to flee the capital city of Kiev. Reports claim the man was trying to evacuate the war-torn country before Russian troops mercilessly killed him. And Ukraine has released a video of attacking Russian forces from an armored vehicle. The video on your screens here shows Russian armored personnel carrier and forces being fired at from the vehicle, as it's seen on a monitor inside that vehicle. And Russian Defense Ministry has now released a video on Tuesday. The clip showing Russian soldiers inspecting and collecting weapons allegedly taken from Ukrainian forces. Russia says weapons were captured in the capital city of Kiev. Weapons factory in Kiev was heavily damaged in a Russian attack. The video on your screens here shows heavily damaged factory. Outside that factory, shopkeepers and helpers were seen sweeping glass and other debris from the impact of these explosions. And to understand the gravity of the Ukraine war, just look at these visuals on your screens. A couple there seen crying after their building was bombed by Russian forces, completely devastated as an uncertain future looms large over civilians who are desperate to find a safe space. And over 3 weeks into the war, frustrated and furious, Putin has now started bombing residential buildings in Kiev. At least 3 people were killed in the attack, while dozens of civilians have now been injured. And a footage released by Ukrainian military shows the aftermath of Russian strikes on Okhtyrka, the city of Ukraine. Video there shows how a residential building was turned into rubble after non-stop bombardment from Russian forces. And Russian Defense Ministry has released a video on Tuesday to show destroyed and abandoned military vehicles in Ukraine's Kherson region. This video on your screens here shows destroyed armored vehicles and tanks. And Russian assault on Ukraine continues, and it is the capital city, Kiev, that is currently under attack. Russia has stepped up its offensive on Kiev. These images on your screens here are of residential blocks inside Kiev, which was bombed. Huge plumes of smoke were seen coming out of that building.
Fire tenders are working to...
And Russian missiles have hit residential buildings in the center of Ukrainian Kiev. Now, painting a totally devastating picture of buildings and homes that have been collapsed. Videos there shows residential complexes being charred after missile attacks. And it's raining missiles and airstrikes even in the second day, the second largest city there on the 22nd day of this war in Ukraine. These visuals are coming in of the aftermath of airstrikes at night in Kharkiv. Fire erupts as airstrikes rain in the city. Horror arrives in Ukraine cities as Russia continues to up its assault. And an absolutely heart-wrenching event. The image on your screens here is that of the Russian army tanks who are having fun by shelling residential complexes in the small city of Volnovakha in Ukraine. And amid non-stop heavy shelling, Russian invaders destroy the city of Velika Dimerka, leaving it in complete ruins. Shelling continued in that region. Horror of shelling. A bus stop where Ukrainian civilians are staying is now captured on the cameras that you see. The Russian assault continues to become uglier, with now residential complexes becoming a main target of missile attacks. This comes on your screens. The aftermath of destruction that was caused by heavy shelling inside the city, tearing everything apart, while relief works is being currently carried out. And large plumes of smoke emerged from a site of Chuguev in Ukrainian city Kharkiv, where rockets were launched by Russian occupiers, destroying everything that came its way. And more Russian troops were called to launch a strong offensive against a peaceful rally in Mariupol city, as images capture large numbers of soldiers present at that site aiming to disperse protesting Ukrainians. And as the Russia assault intensifies, even on day 20 of that war, drone footage here captures the heavy destruction that was caused to buildings, schools and residential complexes after being shelled non-stop in the city of Mariupol. And devastating visuals of destruction all around in the city of Donetsk on your screens here. This is the aftermath of continuous shelling and bombing by Russian troops, launching an aggressive offensive even as war enters day 22. And Russian airstrikes continue to rock Ukraine. Visuals on your screens here are of Kurenivka area in capital city of Kiev, where a Russian missile has hit a residential area. And Russian troops attack Antonov aviation industry, a plant right in the capital city, a historic aviation establishment in Kiev. Heavy shelling has caused massive fire to the plant. You can see now plumes of smoke coming out from that plant. Russian soldiers also attacked a high-rise building along with the plant, killing at least 2 people in those attacks. Now we're looking at weeks of devastation. On day 22, Kharkiv again comes under terrifying attack by Russian forces. Here are those images that you see on your screens here that shows that Kharkiv, the second most populous city of Ukraine, continues to be the center of attacks. Now we're seeing visuals from different parts of Kharkiv that shows large-scale, widespread devastation as plumes of smoke coming out of those buildings that have just been struck at. More details on the other side. Do stay with us.
As Russia declared war on Ukraine, as the world was plunged again into crisis, with the only Indian team in the real war zone.
This is Mariupol. You hear a series. Hear this sound.
I will show you a quick, so to say, bombshell room tour.
I can smell the gunpowder in the air.
And without pause, India Today totally dominates viewership and smashes the competition. When it's the world's biggest news story, there's only one gold standard of journalism. When it's the world's biggest news story, there's only one gold standard of journalism.
You are watching India Today.
Tonight, we are all soldiers of music, wielding the power of art in defense of a free and democratic Ukraine. Music offers solace for humanity, but it can also be weaponized against oppression. Tonight, we are all soldiers of music, wielding the power of art in defense of a free and democratic Ukraine.
It was being broadcast tonight live to Europe, including Ukraine, and I hope that some people there were listening. Yeah. So it's a sort of transference of thought and emotion.
I was crying, I was screaming bravo because I feel like in this moment all of us become like relatives, like one family, one free family.
When it's the world's biggest news story, there's only one gold standard of journalism.
You are watching India Today. You
Most heart-rending scenes of war. Devastated and dying in Ukraine. Doctors race to save as many lives as possible. Piles of bodies in hospitals. The last hospital standing in Mariupol. Corpses of infants all around. Children of war, innocents butchered. Gut-wrenching, devastating, and shattering. Ukraine is bleeding.
Now we're looking at 22 days of Russian invasion that's put Putin's guns, in fact, up against Ukraine. Ukraine now is war-torn with humanitarian crisis unfolding in the largest form in recent times. I'm Nabila Jamal. We'll take you through all the updates. First, the headlines. It's day 22 of Russian invasion, but Putin's guns are far from silent. Air raids, missiles rain mystery on Kharkiv. Capital Kiev witnesses barrage of rocket strikes. Hopes of diplomacy between Russia and Ukraine rise amid devastation. Putin claims success after Ukraine's NATO shift. ICJ orders Russia to stop the invasion. Zelensky calls it a big win. And truce in the horizon after 3 weeks of devastating war. Russia and Ukraine zero in on 15-point peace plan. India today decodes 10 possible outcomes to the war. And United States sending Switchblade suicide drones to Ukraine to counter Russian kamikaze drones, which are literally slipping past Ukraine's air defense. And children bear the cost of Putin's Ukraine invasion. War creating a child refugee every second. At least 1 million kids have fled Ukraine over the last 3 weeks. It's now day 22 of the invasion in Ukraine, and Russia continues to attack cities, causing heavy damage. The city of Kharkiv continues to be the worst hit. A market in Kharkiv was bombed, following which the fire raged on for hours, with smoke engulfing the nearby buildings as well. Russia has now released a video of their brutal airstrikes on Ukraine. The video here showing missile attacks that burn an area into ashes within minutes' time. A theatre was targeted at, where thousands took shelter. In Mariupol was entirely bombed. All those people who took refuge in that theatre are currently trapped in debris. Casualties and the number yet to be ascertained. Capital city of Kiev also continuing to face back-to-back attacks. A rocket was hit. In fact, it hit a residential area, destroyed the neighborhood, but Ukrainians now refuse to give up. Their resistance has also caused significant damage to Russian military. Ukraine attacked Russian tanks that were firing at shelters across the city of Mariupol. The city has been hit hard by Russian shells, air bombs. Ukraine has also shot down a Russian chopper at Mykolaiv.
Сегодня вот прилетела бомба. Посмотрите, что случилось. Авиаудар.
These visuals coming in from the war-ravaged city of Kharkiv. Very disturbing footage here. Shows how Russia has really upped its attack and its aggression on many parts of Ukraine, including Mariupol, Chernihiv, Kharkiv, Kiev, and the areas around. Many civilians now struggling to be evacuated. In fact, despite green corridors, despite shelters, despite safe spaces, civilians there are fearing for their life and safety. Here are these compelling images and visuals that India Today brings to you on day 22 of the war. Remember, even as bilateral talks are currently taking place, we're still looking at attacks that continue unabated. Now, let me quickly cut across to Hannah Shelest, Editor-in-Chief of Ukraine Analytica from Kiev, to give us an insight here. Thank you very much, Hannah, for taking time out. We know that this is a tense situation for your people. It's really sad for us to see the kind of humanitarian crisis that unfolds in your country. And even while talks are underway between the two nations, Russia so far has not shown any signs of de-escalation. In fact, they've upped their attacks and now targeting several civilian establishments, including the theatre that housed thousands of civilians in Mariupol that's now been attacked. Give us a sense of what's been the spirit of Ukrainians even on day 22 today.
The spirit is still high, and you see that more and more people are joining territorial defense in different cities, plus more and more people are joining volunteers who are assisting with the humanitarian aid. Because now more and more cities need this humanitarian aid and the efforts to help those people who are internally displaced people or who are trying to refuge to other countries. However, even if now we have approximately 3 million people already being refugees abroad, but approximately the same amount moved just inside of the country from the eastern regions to the western region. Definitely the most difficult situation currently is on the north and on the east.
Right.
You named the city of Kharkiv and Mariupol, but unfortunately attacks, airstrikes started in other parts of the country, so people are on the high alert there.
Hannah, stay with us. I'm going to quickly cut across to Rajesh Pawar. He's, in fact, India Today's contributor, bringing us all those reports from those combat zones. Even he's in Kiev. Rajesh, I really hope you're doing okay. And thank you very much for really braving all those attacks and the sounds and the threat that's looming all around you, and yet bringing us factual information from that war-torn country. Now, Rajesh, we're looking at civilian establishments, including a theater in Mariupol that housed close to 1,000 people in that. They were hiding, trying to protect themselves from those the onslaught of attacks. That has been bombarded. The casualties have not been confirmed yet. Give us an understanding of what's been the spirit of civilians there, even on day 22.
Look, I'll first go to this strike on the theater in Mariupol.
Right.
Ukrainian forces have claimed that Russian airstrikes have destroyed this theater, which was housing about 1,000 people who are forced to leave their houses and live there as a kind of shelter, kind of a place for these people who are displaced from their homes and nearby villages. But the Russian defense ministry spokesperson has denied this categorically. They said there have been no air attacks on any theater in Mariupol. So it's difficult to verify anything because our primarily sources are only Ukrainian and Western sources. So it's difficult to say what is true right now. Mariupol is a city under siege right now. Nobody can go there. No reporter is reporting from there as of now. Foreign reporter is reporting from there. And that is a city which has been cut off with electricity, water, gas, everything. And that is a really sorry state of affairs. And if this is true, this is a really humanitarian disaster which has happened there and should not have happened. Over to you.
You know, Rajesh, I did speak with a Ukrainian MP just a few minutes ago, and I did question him about Russian forces, whether or not they've encircled the capital city of Kiev. He refused those reports. He denied it, in fact, saying that that's not true. But why don't you give us a sense, where are those Russian forces? Are they close to Kiev? Have they encircled the capital city?
Look, Nabila, let me tell you, a lot of these Ukrainian MPs have been coming on Indian channels and giving their views. Let me tell you one thing for your viewers, clarification. These MPs here do not have the same kind of clout which MPs in India have. In fact, they are not even briefed about the war. They have no idea about what's happening around except what they see on TV and around their house. They're not briefed about the situation at all. They're not involved in the decision making like in India. So it's a very different scenario. Number two, they generally parrot the same line which the government of their country is parroting, irrespective of what the facts on ground are. Let me tell you, Kiev is the Russian forces on the northwest are just 9 kilometers away from the boundary of Kiev. Fighting has now subsided a little bit, which was going on for last 9 days, because 90% of that area, Irpin, is under Russian forces' control now. And moment it becomes 100%, moment that area is totally secured, then Russian army has a free hand and they can launch a ground offensive on Kiev anytime. However, on the northeast, which we thought the Russian forces advanced from that direction as well, from Bravery. That area is now not seeing any kind of fighting, and there probably Russian forces in that area have withdrawn a little bit and probably are regrouping and stocking up on their supplies so that if need be to launch an assault from that side, they are properly stocked up. As far as south and other west of Kiev is concerned, there are no Russian forces that side as of now, and there were no airstrike in Kiev city last night. Over to you, Nabila.
All right. You know, Rajesh, I'd really request you, if it is safe, for you to show us what's behind you and give us a sense of the environment in the capital city of Kiev. And while you're at it, also explain to us, where have the talks reached between the two countries? There seems to be a couple of scenarios that are unfolding, with a lot of reports suggesting that Ukraine finally could come to a compromise, may not insist on a NATO membership, and might just abide by Russia's demand for it to be for it to consider a neutral status. Is that true?
Okay, Nabila, if I'm showing you around, if you can see this.
We can see
I'm trying to show. These are heritage buildings. This is the center of Kiev city. These are the buildings which were made in 1927. So this is the center, the showpiece of Ukraine, of Kiev. The heritage buildings, the Independence Square, the center of the city. As far as talks between the two countries are concerned, see, it has been going on. There have been 4 rounds of talks. And after that, they decided that they will probably be meeting every day now through virtual meetings. So representatives of Russia and Ukraine have been meeting on a daily basis virtually. And when will the next round of physical talking, physical face-to-face talking is difficult to say, but they have drawn up some 15 points on which they are willing to talk and to discuss these issues. There has been a softening of stand with regards to NATO membership, Zelensky, but it is because West America and Western Europe has very categorically said that they cannot include Ukraine in NATO at the moment. So Ukraine had no choice but to say that they cannot join NATO anymore, but they are seeking guarantees from countries, Russia, America, China, and from Western Europe, that their sovereignty, their security will never be compromised in future. As far as the other contentious point is, Crimea and Donbass, there has been still no softening of stand from Ukraine, and that is very critical for Russia. And that is the reason this war started. So till the time Ukraine do not make some kind of concessions on Crimea and on the status of Donbass, I think these talks will remain stalled. Over to you, Nabila.
You know, while that's said, and while there is sense that Ukraine may just be coming down on their, or stepping down on their demands and their push, we're looking at simultaneous appeals coming in from President Zelensky to the Western countries, including the United States, asking for more ammunition, more support, and to step in to help them fight and stay strong during this dark hour. So we're a little confused as to where does Ukraine stand? Are they looking at support from the West while they are planning to compromise on their demands?
Look, Ukrainian president has been trying his best. He was addressing the American Congress 2 days back. He addressed the British Parliament. He is making appeals to all head of states of these Western countries, Western European and America. But what he wants, he's not getting that. He wanted airplanes, fighter aircrafts, and there was some indication from Poland that they might give MiG-29 aircraft to Ukraine, which was later, the proposal was shot down by Americans. They said, no, it is not possible. It's not feasible to give this MiG-29 to Ukraine. And second question is, even if they get these aircraft, from where will they operate? Almost all airfields in Ukraine today have been either put out of operation or are under occupation of Russian forces. So from where will these aircrafts will operate? Second thing is about Ukraine has been continuously demanding from everywhere. In fact, there are billboards in the city saying, we are not asking, we are begging you. Please close the space over Ukraine. They want a no-fly zone to be enforced over Ukrainian skies, and they have been begging this from everywhere, from Americans to Western European countries.
And we know that NATO has said that this raises fears that this could escalate, hostilities between the Western countries and Russia, which is a nuclear-armed country.
Very true. Absolutely. It is. They do not want to get involved directly in this fight, because enforcing a no-fly zone can also bring the Russian aircraft and the NATO aircraft face to face. They might even shoot at some Russian missiles or aircraft, which will mean a direct military confrontation with Russia, which West does not want at all.
Right.
But what they could do is, and which Ukraine probably wants, is they could put some very strong anti-aircraft defenses inside Ukraine, the way they have done it in Poland. Last week, America has put 2 new batteries of Patriot missiles in Poland to defend it against any kind of future attack on Poland by Russian forces. They could do the same to Ukraine, but they did not do it. And that is what Ukrainians understand now, that they are alone in this fight. They might keep going, requesting all these things, but what is critical for the defense, the West is not doing that, and they understand this now. Over to you.
We understand. Rajesh, thank you very much, and I request you to please stay safe. Rajesh joining us, giving us a perspective and an insight into what's running on the minds of Ukrainians right now, and of course the kind of the aggressive offensive coming in from the Russian side. We also have joining us Hannah, who's the editor-in-chief, Ukraine Analytica. Hannah, several contradictory media reports now claiming that Russia has managed to capture some of those key cities, the top 10 cities. Among them, a few cities like Mariupol, the port city, has been captured. They've managed to invade into several other cities. It's only until they fully capture. Is that a fact? What's the real story on ground? Has Russia really managed to fully capture any area?
If you would allow me, I would comment also on some of the allegations your journalist did, with all respect, but it seems to me he's quite afresh in Kiev and he just provided misinformation to your viewers. First of all, to speak that Ukrainian members of parliament doesn't have any information, it would be not just disrespect to the parliament of Ukraine, but just total absence of information. Within the members of parliament, we have quite a number of former military, those who fought, so they're professionals who know their insights and information. The head of the majority is a member of the delegation on the negotiations with Russia, so he definitely knows what is happening. Including others, they are also part of the territorial defense. They are all the time at the front line. So to say that MPs doesn't have information, it's just complete disrespect and misinformation. Then about the negotiations with the NATO, NATO didn't tell that Ukraine would not be joining. NATO officially at all statements are announcing open door policy. So there was no rejection of Ukrainian future membership. However, yes, this question is now under the negotiations. And about the support that Ukraine is getting, yes, Ukraine didn't receive no-fly zone, that is true. However, Ukraine asked, please provide us with the assistance so we can protect our sky. And within the last days, Ukraine received additional Stingers, Javelins, and just yesterday it was announced that the United States is delivering 100 special military drones, so that can help with the air defense a lot. Plus, the United Kingdom is providing a special air defense system. So to say that Ukraine is alone is just complete manipulation. It's not even the misinformation. You can see the numbers of the support that Ukraine is receiving.
Ukraine is certainly not alone, Hannah, and that's what we see in the statements that are coming in from several Western countries, including the United States. The US has been constantly claiming that they're fully with Ukraine, and they're going to be standing by the country irrespective of what happens. They're going to continue sending supplies. United States, United Kingdom, many of the Western countries, but yet a NATO no-fly zone has not been declared. And that's what's really leaving you as citizens worried, because you're seeing the kind of bombardment coming in.
Definitely no-fly zone is the maximum that we would like to have. That would be the ideal situation. But at the same time, the task is not no-fly zone. The task is to protect Ukraine from the air. And if we can reach this goal by receiving additional assistance for air defense and anti-missile systems, that already would be quite a significant support, because the task is to stop bombardment from the air, from the strategic missiles and ballistic missiles that Russia is sending, but not just to cover Ukrainian airspace. So you need to understand what is the real task. If this task can be reached by other means, that's important, because it's not just statements. Ukraine is receiving military support from many NATO countries, and that is what is really important. Plus intelligence information. Don't forget that it is extremely important for any type of the air defense with such weapons to have sufficient, timely and very quick intelligence information in terms of, satellites and everything. That's also what Ukraine is receiving from our partners.
All right. We're happy to know that you are receiving the kind of support that you're expecting, but yet with Russia's might and force, is there a match to that kind of superiority in their arms and ammunition? That's the question I'd like to ask Sviatoslav, who's joining us, a Ukraine MP from Kiev. Yurash, thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Yurash, we know that a young journalist was killed, someone who was very close to you. We'd like to hear what happened from you, please.
As every single day in my country, Russians are killing numerous people, numerous family members, relatives, dear ones, close ones. And I was just sharing my drama that I have to face for the last couple of days. But the reality is it's already in their tens of thousands that Ukrainians are dying. It's already in their millions. They have to flee and uproot their lives, and it's in the millions who are fighting everywhere against Russian invaders. The reality is that my drama is just one of many, and it's. I was just in the border town, in the town on the supply routes, the western border of Ukraine, and I saw some of those stories of people that were completely out of the conflict and who were crushed and destroyed. And these stories are numerous all over my country these days. And unfortunately, my story that I was trying to tell the world doesn't tell the full narrative of the drama faced by my people right now.
You know, Yurash, we know that this war is a lot more personal to you. You've lost your loved one, and we see pictures here on our screens of Alexandra, and it really leaves our heart broken. You've put out a really heart-wrenching tweet as well, you know, and in that you very clearly say that you will not forget, you will not forgive, and if anything, it would only be that death did you apart. And here with the loss of Alexandra, I don't know if you have anything to say. How would you remember her today?
She was full of life, full of ambition. She was doing many things and trying to create initiatives, plenty, that changed Ukraine and will change Ukraine still. Our job is to make her live in those initiatives, in those efforts, in those ambitions, in those projects, and to continue that work in one way or the other, so she can have a chance to fulfill some of those dreams that she shared with people around, with me. And the point is here to let all these Ukrainians who died fighting for our independent country or building an independent country, living in an independent country, to keep that independent country in the memory of them.
Yurash, I can really feel the pain in your voice. I can see the pain in your eyes. You seem very disturbed, and we are disturbed with this kind of the humanitarian crisis that unfold. And you've lost a loved one, Alexandra, your girlfriend. You've been together for a decade. Could you narrate to us, please, on how was she killed? How did she come under fire?
She was not my girlfriend. She was so very much more. For a decade, we've went through different, basically seeing the world through each other's eyes in a way that's incompatible. She was killed by the Russian artillery fire that killed her and a journalist who's also a friend to me and who spent we worked with him for many years, with a journalist as well. And the point is that as far as journalists being killed in Ukraine, that's an occurrence that's happening almost every day now. Russians are targeting everyone and killing and destroying lives. And basically the point of the story of Alexandra is she, for what we understand, she didn't have a chance there. There was direct artillery hit on the car that she was in. So the point is that that's the way that Russians killed her.
You know, it really shakes us to even imagine what may have happened. Many of them on their job, while they do their job, while they stand for their country, have come under fire by the Russian forces. This is really heartbreaking, and these images there show such a lovely, beautiful Alexandra. Yurash, your memories with Alexandra today, if you think back.
Again, she had plenty of dreams, ambitions. She was just visiting just before the war, she was going to those countries in Europe where she was trying to see the life as it should be in Ukraine. She was building those projects, initiatives. She was working on music festivals that she organized. She worked with film production crews making films in Ukraine. And the point here is not just to remember, point is to continue, point is to build, point is to fulfill the dreams that are shared by so many in my country that have lost the chance to realize those dreams.
You know, Yurash, while I read your tweet here again, it says only death could have done us apart. You say decade of happiness and sadness. And also in that same tweet, you've also written, you shall never be forgotten, they shall never be forgiven. What do you mean when you say that?
I mean that the Russians who have killed her, it is something that Ukraine and the world should not forget. But the fact of the matter remains that Russians are causing such horror all across my country every single day. And there are Alexandras in their thousands already. What's happening in Mariupol, for example, what you've discussed as well, is already more than 20,000 dead. At least that's what we can count. And that's just not just in Mariupol or Kiev, that's all across a 1,000-kilometer border with Russia, where they are killing, where they're destroying. And we will never be able to forget the lives that were led by these people who dreamed of a brighter future. And the Russians who have chosen to kill instead of doing the right thing and leaving us to make our choice for the future, will have their moment of justice in that future, which is ever just to all those who do this horrible crime against humanity, not just in case of Alexandra, but in case of my whole country, leading into that battle which will decide our future.
You know, Yurash, we know that after the death of Alexandra, this is certainly has hit you hard. Your heart that was once full of love is now filled with hate. At least that's what I understand from the tweet that you've written, that you now learn to hate. Is there something that you vouch today post Alexandra's death?
I already compiled a list of the military battalions the Russians had near the place where she was killed, and that could have fired that artillery piece which killed Alexandra, as well as many others, including my journalist friend and others who were in the area at that point. And we will do everything to bring them to justice in every way imaginable. But again, how can I not hate those who are attacking my country, killing my people, day in, day out, in all different places? And there are many thousands of Alexandras already all over my country who have done nothing wrong, who have lived their lives and who have perished in this fight for our country's future. So the point is not just about the story of Alexandra, not just about that, not those perpetrators, but about the whole Russian state, which has done here that which will go down in history with the infamy and hate of the future generations, who will never forget, will never forgive. And here I stress to India, that has a treaty with Russia of friendship and partnership, to think of all these thousands of Alexandras the Russians are killing every day. Think of all the horror Russia's causing, not just in my country, but all over the world. Look at that nation which is destroying international world order in their policies for 2 decades of Mr. Putin's rule, and reconsider, because it's not just about Ukraine, it's about the world being peaceful, or the world going to the madness of war that we hoped to leave behind.
You know, Yurash, we are looking at several civilians who fled the country. There seems to be some resistance. Certainly, we laud your spirit and courage. Civilians there putting up stiff resistance. But when it hits your own, when your home is struck at, when someone you love you lose, does it demoralize you, or has it really emboldened you further to fight for your country and stand by it in this hour?
Initially, the motivation for Ukrainians was the fight for our independence and the fact that this is our generation's battle for the future. Now, almost everyone has that story, which is heart-wrenching to no end to them, and they will fight. They will fight to avenge all those who perished. They will fight to destroy all those who destroyed. And I am but one of millions, and we will battle on, because what choice do we have? We love this nation, and we love all those that we lost.
Anything that you remember of Alexandra saying to you towards the end? She was working even while the attack happened. She was on the job, and we know she must have been as spirited as you sound while you speak. You yourself are an MP. You've been fighting for your country. Anything that you want to leave behind as a statement or as a messenger of what Alexandra may have said to you today?
She was defiant to stay until the very end in Kiev and to do her duty as a journalist, as a Ukrainian in Ukraine, and she was committed to that. She was very, very clear that this is the moment where she is needed, and she made that choice to stay in Ukraine and tell the story to the world through that channel that she worked with. She will remain that voice which will be speaking to the world every single day from now on, because that voice is exemplary of Ukrainians who defied all odds, who defied the threats, the dangers, the battles, destruction, and stayed in their country to fight the fight for the future and to tell the world about what is happening here.
You know, Yurash, while we've lost Alexandra, you've lost Alexandra, we know that the spirit continues to stay on in you. You are an MP yourself. Are you doing, do you plan on intend to get to the field, get to the streets? We know civilians have now doubled up as soldiers in Ukraine, only to stand for their country and really empower your country at this moment. Do you have plans on those lines at all?
From day one, every single MP in Ukraine could receive a weapon and join the fight because the battle was happening right here in Kiev, the capital of our country. On day one, I joined in one way or the others and have been expanding and trying to do all I can to do. I am no soldier. I'm rudimentary soldier at best and trying to learn those skills with people who lived through much, much worse than I can ever imagine to live through. Basically, as far as the future and what it holds for us, this is the fight for everyone. And members of parliament like myself are taking up weapons, are taking up arms, are fighting back, because we are a part of this nation. And we are a part of that nation which is fighting for its very survival right now. And our job right now is to be here, stay with our people, support in every way we can. And that is something we will do, and it's something I have done for every one of those days that passed since the war began.
You know, Yurash, finally, as an MP, as the state's administration yourself, after losing the love of your life, after losing Alexandra, would you still appeal to people to stay back? What would you say to those citizens who are really terrified over this war?
We are hoping those humanitarian corridors will be respected by Russia. They have been shelled time and time and time again. And those civilians, women, children, elderly, we are trying to provide them security. And I'm thankful to the world that is receiving our millions of refugees and giving them shelter, giving them support in different regards. My ancestors didn't have that opportunity when they faced the Second World War, the First World War, the Holocaust, Stalin's collectivization, Holodomor, genocide by hunger. Now we have the world that's with us and the world that will support us in different means. The point is that those who are staying behind are heroes, because these people are committing their lives to the battle for the future of our country, the battle which will be in history forever, and battle which we cannot lose.
You know, Yurash, as I let you go here, we know that this war will come to an end in just a few days, but people whose lives have lost, you're never going to get them back. Alexandra, the love of your life is gone. Her memory remains. And even as the two countries may solve the situation, at least bilaterally, they might come to a conclusion. The war will end. But the kind of casualties that this has resulted in, is there a resolve or a resolution that you would hold here today amid this kind of large-scale devastation?
We always ask for one thing: that Russia gets out of our country, leaves us alone to choose our own future as we want to choose it. We ask that, and we ask the world to support us in that very simple request, to give us our country and let us choose what that country follows, what that country needs and wants and will pursue. Now, with all that we have lost, I'm not sure that peace you speak of is possible. I'm not sure that Putin will step back after he knows what he has done, after his bloody place in history, and after he's far from being done with our country, that he has done everything to destroy, and we are doing everything to defy him. So I'm not sure that peace that you speak of is on the horizon. Russia doesn't want it. It kills every single day. You can watch the images yourself. Every single day, people in my country, Alexandros of my country. And the point is that after seeing that, peace seems an impossibility. Victory, though, seems a reality.
Yuresh, with a really heavy heart, I'd really like to say, may Alexandra rest in peace. Our deepest condolence to you. May she live on. May her thoughts live on. Thank you very much. We can really imagine what your country and your people are going through in this really darkest hour as we see unfolds. 22 days on and the war continues. Hannah, Yuresh, really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you.
Now, these haunting images here really show the kind of devastation even after 22 days, all the way from day 1 to day 22. India Today has been bringing you all those factual details, corroborated with evidence here as visuals that we show of devastation coming in from the most severe combat zones where civilians have lost their lives. Many of them have fled in millions. They've fled the country. Millions more who stay back, really wanting to see their country survive, wanting to fight and stand up for their country in this deepest, darkest hour. These visuals here are very compelling to show what Ukraine is currently going through. They're being trampled upon. These visuals here of bombing, bombardment, strikes in different parts of Ukraine, really speaking of a horrific story that unfolds on the 22nd day of this war in Ukraine. These are images here that we see, really compelling visuals. We're going to bring you more on the details of developments when it comes to talks between the two sides. When will the war end? On the other side of a short break. Stay with us.
Rahul Kanwal, 23 years of experience, 5 conflicts covered, unmatched time in war zone.
The first embedded operation in the history of Indian television journalism.
Gaurav Sawant, 28 years of reporting, 8 conflicts covered, unmatched hours in conflict areas.
Actual firing is taking place, the grads are firing.
Shivarur, 19 years of reporting, 5 conflicts covered, unmatched view of international crossfires.
And the attack guns are firing away.
Geeta Mohan, 18 years of reporting, 3 conflicts covered. When the world is at war, there is no compromise on India Today.
When it's the world's biggest news story, there's only one gold standard of journalism. This is Ukraine's true danger zone. Up close and fearless in Ukraine's combat zone. When it's the world's biggest news story, there's only one gold standard of journalism. This is Ukraine's true danger zone. Up close and fearless in Ukraine's combat zone.
You are watching India Today.
Did you ever notice the walking style of Russian President Vladimir Putin? The way he walks with his right arm held rigid while his left arm swings freely. Technically, this kind of move is called clearly reduced right-sided arm swing. The British Medical Journal had published this study in 2015. In the study, the team of neurologists had studied his walking style and said that he dons a strange gunslinger's move. So where did he learn this style from? Researchers estimate that when Putin used to spy in the KGB of the Soviet Union, it was then that he must have learned to walk like this during weapons training. According to the researchers, Putin's walking style fits as per KGB training manual. Let's also tell you that Putin rose from the rank of a spy in KGB to the rank of a lieutenant colonel. KGB operatives are told to hang the weapon in their right hand, leaning to one side, move rapidly with the opposite leg extended. This also increases the speed of walking. Researchers also said that Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev, former Russian defense ministers Anatoly Serdyukov, Sergei Ivanov, and a military commander have been seen in such moves. Neurologist and movement disorder specialist Bastian Bloem had led this study. In one of his interviews, he'd said that this is an unusual study, but at the same time, it's a very serious question for neurological observation.
When it's the world's biggest news story, there's only one gold standard of journalism. This is Ukraine's true danger zone. Up close and fearless in Ukraine's combat zone.
You are watching India Today.
Right here you have images coming in from the war-torn country of Ukraine. Blasts that continues even on this day, 22 days of war, and it doesn't have any signs of de-escalation. Here to counter Russian death drones, we're looking at striking Ukraine. The United States is only now helping Ukraine by supplying some Switchblade drones to Ukraine. This is the latest information that we get, even as Russia uses superior sophisticated arms and ammunition. United States now stepping up to help Ukraine with Switchblade drones. Now, this works on suicide mode, the small drones carrying warhead that detonate on impact. Russia, on its part, has been using stealthy suicide drones to attack the Ukrainian army. On both ends, we're seeing combat that continues on day 22. Ukraine standing up to Moscow's offensive despite weeks of ravaging assault, showing unparalleled courage and spirit rarely seen in recent times. Showing it can be a match to Moscow's superior military might and far sophisticated weaponry, but Russia on its part has been using stealthy suicide drones to attack the Ukrainian army. These unmanned drones, evading radar and traditional air defense system, can slip past enemy line of fire. This devil in the sky is lethal, using loitering munitions which wait passively in the air, hovering over the target before coming down in one deathly swoop. The drone falls head first along a vertical trajectory similar to kamikazes, a Japanese aircraft loaded with explosives, and making a deliberate suicidal crash on an enemy target. Russia is using these drones to make precision attacks on military targets in Ukraine. Each of them packs a small explosive charge up to 3 kgs. Targets are fed into the drone or through an image uploaded on its control system. The drone then finds its target and drops itself to blow the target into smithereens. These loitering munition drones are multi-purpose and used as part of a swarm of drones, flying silently as fast as 130 km per hour with a flight duration of 30 minutes. To counter Russian death drones, the US is now supplying Ukraine with Switchblade drones, which works in similar kamikaze fashion. The small drones made by AeroVironment Ammunition Major carrying warhead detonate on impact. Bureau Report, India Today. Let me quickly cut across to Shiv Arur, joining us live from the newsroom to give us an understanding into what these stealthy suicide drones really mean. Shiv, Russia now using the most sophisticated weaponry from their arsenal. They're now unleashing stealthy suicide drones, and to counter that, United States helping Ukraine with switchblade drones. Give us an understanding on the impact these drones could tender.
Nabila, putting the spotlight on drones is hugely important because even in just the recent past in conflicts between Armenia and Azerbaijan, we've actually seen how suicide drones, attack drones of the exact same kind that are being used here between Ukraine and Russia have been absolute game changers. Now, just consider what a suicide drone is. It's a intelligent little aircraft. It's unmanned, obviously, remote controlled, programmed to fly, pretty significant distances, many kilometers, tens of kilometers if necessary, has sensors to be able to pick up targets if they're not pre-programmed. It can loiter around targets and at an optimal moment dive out of the sky and hit them. We've seen multiple videos that have come out since day 2 of the Russia-Ukraine conflict where Ukraine has demonstrated the use of, the Turkish Bayraktar drones, for precision strikes on Russian artillery positions. And now you're seeing the Ukrainians being supplied with switchblade drones. The Russians have their own attack, mini drones as well, which they've been using, to hit certain positions. Much of the damage that you actually see in those videos that have been coming out on both sides could actually be from drone strikes. And the sort of pixelated infrared imagery you see are from other drones which are actually capturing the damage that's been brought to bear by these attack drones. So they are absolute game changers. This era of drone warfare once again being affirmed, Nabila, by what's happening in Ukraine. And I can tell you for sure that scientists, military, weapons industry personnel, they're all looking at this very closely because there are lessons being learned on how to improve these systems, make them more autonomous, remove the human from the equation as much as possible, unleash them in swarms, get them out there to completely change the tide of conflict. And that's one of the reasons why Ukraine perhaps has been able to fend off a much larger invading force at this point.
Right. Shiv, these suicide drones that Russia is unleashing bears a lot of similarity and resemblance with the kamikaze Japanese drones. Give us an understanding on how deadly this could really turn out to be, the kamikaze drones in compared to this that we see from Russia.
Well, the word kamikaze is a Japanese word, and in the Japanese context, those weren't even kamikaze drones. During World War II, there were kamikaze pilots, who actually flew. Kamikaze is basically the Japanese god of wind, and the kamikaze pilots were basically bomber pilots who, once their fuel and their weaponry were exhausted, they would actually ram their planes into American or allied targets, and that's where they got their names kamikaze, because they were basically suicide bombers flying these planes. So that's where the word kamikaze now gets extrapolated to these drones, because these drones basically hunt for targets and then they dive out of the sky and hit them. So the reason why these drones are extremely advanced is because they both carry a sensor to find the target. They carry a multifunctional computer to process that target, beam it back to the home station to get that clearance for that attack if it's not an autonomous mission. Then it has a warhead as well to actually swoop out of the sky and finish the mission. And these are deadly accurate, Nabila. These are systems which are just a few feet in length. They can be carried in backpacks, like the story you've done on the switchblades, which the US is going to be supplying to Ukraine. These are tiny little drones that can be carried in a small military backpack, very quickly deployed, quickly programmed, and launched for an attack on a target that may be barely a handful of kilometers away. So these are deadly, very low investment, high on technology, and devastating in their impact.
Shiv, thank you very much for joining us on that. We're looking at these kamikaze drones that now seems to be an ammunition which Russia is boasting of. They're now delivering it in numbers as Ukraine comes under fire from Russia. I'm going to quickly take you through the capabilities of these kamikaze drones that Russia is currently using in Ukraine, to which we hear that United States has stepped up to try and send out switchblade drones to Ukraine to counter these really deadly suicide drones coming in from Russia. Now, the kamikaze drone, it's super stealthy, unmanned drones that carries explosives. In fact, this warhead evades air defense. It's super sleek and slips past the enemy line. It seeks out the target that's been fed via images, and literally can hover around and over the target for an opportune time for it to strike and hit head first. It could explode in suicide strike. It could be used in swarm drones. In fact, a swarm of these drones can be sent out in one shot. We're looking at these systems now that has come about from Russia with top speed of 130 kilometers per hour with a payload of at least 3 kgs. And this flight duration can go up to 30 minutes. We're looking at accuracy and precision of these suicide drones which Russia has now unleashed. Now, how do you fight a superpower which is out to really annihilate you? Now, you do what Ukraine is doing with killer precision, using its Brahmastra drones to take out approaching Russian tank convoys. Enter the super lethal and super silent Bayraktar drones in Ukraine's arsenal. Here's a detailed report on the kind of ammunition that's now been unleashed.
Look carefully. Perhaps the most compelling aerial image of Ukraine's counter-strike on its invaders. Look carefully at these infrared images. What you're looking at is a Russian missile position being struck from the skies by a Ukrainian drone. The drone said to be raining this hell on Russian forces is the Bayraktar TB2, a combat drone fleet supplied by Turkey in 2019. These drones carry 4 laser-guided missiles that have proven highly effective in combat. The TB2 has a flight time of 24 hours and a communication range of almost 185 miles, with a service altitude ceiling of roughly 25,000 feet. Additionally, some of these drones create a disturbing sound when approaching their targets, which can be psychologically unsettling. The chief of Ukraine's Air Force, Lieutenant General Mykola Oleshchuk, describes the Bayraktar TB2 drones as life-giving. Each Bayraktar TB2 system consists of 6 aerial vehicles, 2 ground control stations, 3 ground data terminals, 2 remote video terminals and ground support equipment. Bayraktar TB2 UAV can carry a maximum payload of more than 55 kilos. The standard payload configuration includes an electro-optical camera module, an infrared camera module, a laser designator, a laser range finder and a laser pointer. Ukraine is the latest instance of these formidable attack drones in action. Bayraktar TB2 drones were heavily effective for Azerbaijan against Armenia in November 2002, as testified by multiple videos that emerged at that time. A precursor to this was the success of the TB2 drones against Russian-made weapons in Syria and Libya. Key aspects like low visibility and detectability thanks to the low radar cross-section makes this drone slick and agile. It is interesting to note that earlier this year, Turkey and Ukraine had an agreement in place to co-produce Bayraktar TB2 drones at a production site in Ukraine. Ukrainian Defense Minister Oleksiy Reznikov told reporters in Kiev that the co-production compound would also include a training center where Ukrainian pilots would be trained. This had caused a lot of resentment and anger amongst the Russian defense establishment back then. And with the drones striking Russian targets once again now, expect things to escalate further from the air. With Sai Kiran Kannan in Singapore, Bureau Report, India Today.
We're going to continue bringing those finer details coming in from this war-ravaged country of Ukraine. More details on the other side. Do stay with us.